Welcome to the Fullcaster Podcast, episode 13. Our guest today is a popular one on the competition karting side of things, none other than four-time SuperNats winner, Billy Musgrave. Obviously, we'll talk about his success in karting, where he is also a big part of the Musgrave Racing Company, or MRC as most people know him, and much more here in a little bit. But obviously plenty to talk about with Billy Dirk, so how about some current events to knock these things out? What are you thinking?
I think we could talk about the 100cc stuff going up a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Pro Tour is now offering 100cc Masters, which...
killing me.
Yeah, I think should be a good time to watch.
Yeah, I saw the announcement of that deal. 100cc Masters getting added to the Pro Tour. Obviously, that's happening in Indiana. I want to say second and third weekends of August, and that's my jam, right? That's definitely what I want to go do, but that's the same time as our Classical GP over here, and there's no chance I'm going to be able to do that.
Right.
But yeah, to your point, though, about just overall the 100cc stuff kind of gaining popularity, I think it's saying something that SKUSA adds the Masters class on there. But, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that the X30 Masters deal, at least at the national level, or I should say anytime we're not talking about SuperNats.
Right.
It seemed to be a bit of a struggle. I don't really know. I was thinking about that today, actually, just the X30 stuff, because, I mean, Pro Kart just happened, and it looks like even all the senior guys are going and running 100cc as well.
I think a lot of people are realizing you can get just as good as racing and spend a little bit less, on the weekend to weekend.
Well, there's certainly less going on with, not having the water and the radiator and crap like that. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't know much about the tuning side of that, but...
I mean... the tires are going to cost you the same, right? But the tires do last a little bit longer, which is being a little bit harder compound. So,
right, yeah.
Getting a little bit more out of that, especially because the whole point of the 100cc thing was coming back was to keep the grassroots part of karting, and we've definitely seen that with some of our 206 customers or buddies, if you will, moving up into 100cc. But like you were just saying, the X30 guys, decent chunk of them, going back down to the air-cooled stuff,
Yeah, I mean, so I know when I did it, I'm like, this is like the 206 for two-stroke,
right.
Basically. I mean, the racing was awesome.
Yeah.
And it wasn't dissimilar from what we were doing in the 206 game. I mean, just case in point, I was able to race wheel-to-wheel with John Crow a good chunk in the Masters 206, and then, God, we were taking all the crap we had done and learned in 206 and just we're doing the same damn thing in 100cc.
Just going faster, yeah.
Yeah, and I think at least some of the people I've talked to that did maybe 100cc back in the day, whether it be KPV or whatever, this newer package, and whether it be KA or VLR or whatever, they're getting out of the bottom a hell of a lot better, and I think that's also helping out the racing and things like that.
Right.
And maybe the allure to it, because it's coming out of the bottom, if you take away the grip difference in the tire, the X30 and the 100cc don't seem to be dramatically different.
Well, I think it was Crow that I was talking to a few years back when I did my first 100cc race with Formula Works. I think back in 2018. But I was talking to John about it. He's like, it's just fast enough you can hurt yourself, and that is really the kind of the gist of it, right?
A little bit more respect for what you got going on.
Exactly, yeah. So I think it's neat because you get people moving up through the ranks that they have to learn how to drive a go-kart differently and how, have more respect for the equipment and that kind of stuff, and where people, and you could put moving back down to from water-cooled or shifter, if you will, to 100cc, that respect's already there, but they appreciate the package.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, to your point about driving things a little bit differently, I mean, I think that's another part of it too, is that certain packages maybe fit certain drivers different. Obviously, you're going to be jumping back in the 100cc game once LAKC gets going again.
Yeah.
I should say, this is being recorded July 13th, and the LAKC, this episode will go out right after LAKC's next round, so hopefully you're already have had a good weekend.
Yeah.
But hopefully. Actually, speaking of driving different packages and stuff like that, you just got a chance to test the GFC. Yeah.
So I was it was just this past Wednesday. Formula Works is out here, and they're the satellite team for Comp Kart and whatnot. So I've been driving a Comp Kart for them all year now, and and I really like the kart. It's taken me a bit to get used to, and it's more so just because I've had to break habits from the VLR and doing all the 4-stroke stuff. So it's been me really trying to break my own habits, and kind of like I've said about people moving up, it's been the same thing with me having to learn how to drive a go-kart differently. It's been a great package, and I've done well in it. A lot of guys have done well in it, and just recently they looks like they've become a distributor, if you will, for GFC. Travis Irving's been a big part of that, and Tony's been helping that progress as well. But I got to hop in that package the other day, and you did too as well, actually. Right. I hopped in Alex Zaragoza's GFC, and I did about 8 laps or so, and I just loved it, man. And I think the big part of it was that the kart just, I felt, and I think you agreed with this as well, but the kart pivots so much off the front. Yeah. Which is, it's point and shoot, which I really like, and that's kind of the tendency and the mindset I've always had of how a go-kart should work, from driving the Sodies here, the rental kart fleet, and then driving especially the VLR for a few years.
Yeah, how a kart should work. Yeah. We're based it off the sport cars.
Right, yeah. So,
but no, you're not wrong, and actually it felt a lot like like a Tony, or at least the OTK stuff that I've been driving lately, right. The 2019s and stuff, and even some of the older ones. But I still felt like because I was driving Travis's, and I must have looked like a cadet out there. So because Travis Irving is not a small man,
right?
And I was reaching for the pedals,
and you're not. It's not like you're super short either. You're an average sized guy. He's just a giant fitting in a go kart. So
yeah, exactly. He's got like the steering wheel's like put out there pretty high, and like literally, I want to say the fairing was at my eye level.
Yeah,
Maybe not a cadet, but I definitely must have looked like a Matt Johnson.
Right.
No neck in it, like really low to the
hunched over
I
a
didn't even
little bit.
have to tuck. It was all there. That's where the speed was coming from. But yeah, to your point, it was a lot of fun trying that different package out. And one of the things I think is interesting about that is when you do drive different packages and you kind of start learning what it is that you like as a driver. Like you said, you like a front end that does a certain thing. Mm-hmm. That's the way you like it. I like to kind of back a cart into the corner. And whether that's fast or not, that's just the way I have typically driven.
Yeah.
And then kind of going back one other step to that, and that's actually a pretty good segue to hitting Billy up about it with some of the stuff he's doing in chassis development, is you got a guy like Gary Carlton, tons of years under his belt, and now develops his own gig. Billy's doing the same thing. I got a chance to play around and try to make the VLR, right, the 206 version, a KA package, and while we had some success, it just it didn't work out that way. But yeah, it's interesting. You can try to make something work for yourself, but then trying to have that baseline where anybody can jump on it and do pretty well, that's a whole different gig.
Yeah, and the comp carts definitely worked out that way. Like, I jumped in it and I was quick, and it just took more on me to figure it out. But when I got in the GFC, it's just much more of what I preferred out of a front end. I'm like, oh, okay, I think anyone can drive this, but I really want to drive it. So
yeah, when, like you said, people have had success on the comp cart. Obviously, so many people have done well. Just the ones that pop in my head, like Dante Yu and Race Liberante and these other cats that have run it. So obviously, it's done well. And I can't remember who ever told it to me the first time, but it was any cart can win if you know how to tune it. Right? Yeah. If you've got the brains and the people behind it, you can still go out there and get a W with it. So,
which is funny because it amazes me that people still drive CRGs. I would never want to hop in one, but to that point, if it works for people, it works, right? And they're fast in it.
And to your point, you just don't like the way the front end has ever worked.
Exactly.
And maybe it's just never been set up for you, right? It's not like you ever went racing on a CRG per se. You just kind of hop in
BS in one for a few laps, yeah.
But finding your own deal is one thing. Trying to find a deal for everybody to work on, that's different. And that's kind of the thing we're going to talk to Billy about, amongst other things. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get our guest for today, Billy Musgrave. Billy Musgrave, thanks for coming out, man.
Thank you for having me.
This has been a long time coming. Obviously, when we start a karting podcast here in SoCal, it's a matter of when, not if, we're gonna snag a Billy Musgrave
for sure
on here. And
I'm honored.
Definitely looking forward to this thing. Right out of the gate, man. I mean, in the current events thing where we're talking about 100 cc's and then we get into the chassis development stuff like that, and I know there's a bit of evolution going on in what you're doing all the time, but before we really get into it and start diving into it, just what is the 9 to 5 for Billy Musgrave? What pays the bills, bud?
If you can call it a 9 to 5,
Right?
I know
It's
the
more
hours,
like a 10 to 10.
hours fluctuate for sure.
Oh man. I mean, honestly, it's just a lot of communication, a lot of phone calls, emails. That kind of stuff never stops, whether it's just answering questions for customers around the country or just answering questions from people looking to get into karting.
This is Musgrave Racing Company.
Yeah, that and LAKC. So I'm
right.
the guy behind the keyboard, pretty much firing back off every email. We get a ton of emails just asking random questions about go-karts and karting and like, where can I come, have my kid have this LAKC school?
Right. Yeah.
So just kind of trying to have that information and just trying to lead these people in the right direction and, finding out where they're from and telling them, hey, go visit some of our local shops. How old are you? What are you looking to do? I try to do a really good job of sending these people to the right places to have them taken care of.
Nice.
And just try to, make karting as easily accessible as possible. So outside of that, the keyboard warrior type stuff where you're just firing away all day. It's a lot of working on go-karts, and lately it's been a lot of shop renovations and a lot of kind of gearing up and kind of clearing out our area and tooling up for the project we got going on right now.
Yeah, you talk about renovations and whatnot. I'm seeing, and obviously I've got a little more information from talking to other people, but Musgrave Racing Company, MRC, seems to be maybe a blossoming slot car game as well. You guys are getting after it in the slot car.
Sounds like you're slowly getting out of karting and going
to
the
slot cars where it's at, guys. I mean, I hate to say it, but slot car axles and tires, that's the tuning game we're all after right now. But no, actually, that's just my dad actually found a little niche. There's not really any kind of slot car or what do we call it, kind of hobby shops like that around anymore.
Right.
And so we just took a area in the back of the shop and kind of set up some of the tracks that he had and got set up as a dealer for some of the slot cars and parts. And, honestly, during all this COVID stuff, it was one of the only things that was kind of keeping us open. We just had a couple of guys who would come in, one at a time or whatever. And, man, you wouldn't believe how much these guys, would spend on tuning their slot cars. I mean, new chassis, new armatures, tires, axles. I mean, they tune the slot car more than we do a go-kart.
Yeah, actually,
be honest, it was you getting your dad out of the kart shop and just another part of the shop. You're like, hey, I have this great idea, and I cleared out this whole area for you.
Oh man, it was actually all him. He's all fired up about it. But it's been good. Just a little change of pace. And
I'm actually not at all surprised what you're talking about slot car stuff. Name dropping a little bit here, but actually the guy who hired me to get back into karting was basically an indoor track. Luke Vasquez, he's the GM at Sidecar Indoor Racing Center for both facilities. Anyway, he actually did a bit of racing, helped run Black Flag Racing. This is back in the early 2000s. And anyways, he actually did slot car racing when he was a kid and got sponsored and all kinds of stuff and would travel around to these big slot car championships. Those little cars, it is no different as far as like how serious it can be and also that kind of stuff. It's just like
absolutely.
RC cars, right? Right across the way from Cal Speed.
Yeah.
You get the RC stuff. So if you think about it, you want to talk about the other ladder. You can go
It's a
slot
whole-
cars to RC or whatever. Or like we talked about, like Jake French running the RC stuff as well.
Yep.
Right.
But racing's racing,
Yes.
and I'm not surprised at all that you guys have found a niche down here of slot car racers that are getting into it. I'm definitely not surprised that, I mean, if you know you can either buy speed or whatever by bolting something on, rock and roll.
And I think it just speaks to that, that if you're a racer, you're a racer. And a lot of the guys that come in to do the slot cars, they're ex-motocross, ex-race car, ex-go-kart, ex-RC car. They love, racing, but it's the
They found another niche for it.
Exactly, and it's the dynamic of it. It's it's the testing, the changing, the learning. It's that aspect that racing has that almost no other sport in the world has. Where you go out and you change your tire pressure, or you change your axle, and you change your hub, you change your wheelbase, and you're trying to feel that, whether it's through a controller and watching the car on the track, or whether it's on RC car track, or whether you're behind the wheel driving. It's that never-ending process of always searching for that little bit of speed or understanding better tire wear or understanding better racecraft. Like, You know what I mean? So no matter what it is, if you're a racer, you understand that, and it's almost addicting. That's what you're always trying to be better and better and better.
Are you getting into the slot car stuff at all? Have you gotten it? I know your dad's actually pretty decent at it.
No,
but
he's actually really good. I can lay down some really fast laps, but I don't know.
And
like
there's more to it than just
hitting
the
so like
trigger,
the way the races go, you do 4 3-minute heats. So that way, like, everybody goes on the lane once. So you all do the same amount of distance and all that stuff.
How long are those laps?
The fast cars are like sub 2 seconds.
Get out.
Jesus.
Yeah. How long's that track? I assume in feet.
About 22 to 25 feet.
In 2 seconds.
In 2
or
seconds.
less.
Wow.
Yeah, 2 to 2.5 seconds.
So,
some of the slower cars like 3.5 seconds. But it's, I mean, to hit your marks perfect for 3 minutes straight.
Yeah.
Like, you think a 15-minute go-kart race is hard? Like, your finger starts cramping up. It's hilarious. Like, I just laugh, but it's literally hard.
I'm going to go off on a little bit. We're going the wrong way a little, but I know you also do a lot of video games and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
So you're telling me that you need to do the trigger finger.
Exactly. You
is
need to work on that. Yeah. Again, the stretches right before the race. But, yeah, I mean, it's the eye-hand coordination and just the, like, even the kids that come in, sometimes the guys will bring their kids, or even, like, the karting kids. I know Troy has brought his kid, Truly, and he digs it. And it's just that, you know.
It's all mental and one finger.
Exactly. It's one finger, but to be perfect takes so much discipline and so much eye-hand coordination that, you know, you get back to something else that's bigger, and it kind of it slows everything else down.
That's what
crazy.
I've said about the iRacing. I know. I mean, we've all done it, right?
Yep.
But obviously, you're using more than one finger. You got your feet and your hands and all that. But it's so mentally draining because you're relying on so much.
Because you actually don't have
stuff.
the feel. Exactly.
Yeah.
So your brain's almost on overkill.
Exactly.
Trying to get everything you can just out of this screen. And a little bit out of the sound from the tires and the engine. But yeah, it's brutal to do a 25-lap race on an iRace. Is like, it's actually tough.
Yeah, that's why when I was doing, I would have the triple screens. I'm like, if I can give my brain more data, like
as much. Yeah.
I use the vision so much and like the peripheral,
Yep.
just being able to see the other kinds of stuff. But obviously a little bit of a tangent there, and I definitely want to get back into the chassis stuff because it sounds like, or maybe I'll just ask you before we kind of put a point on it and maybe come back. Is this kind of going to be the transition here? It's going to be a little bit less MRC and more, you said it's Factory Kart America, you said?
It's Factory Karts of America. The chassis itself will be called Factory Kart. And yeah, exactly. So I'm going to transition away from the race team side of things. I mean, just the amount of, anybody that runs a race team,
Right.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot of work. I know you guys played with it for a while and still do. It's never.
We can't wait
work.
to get out of it.
Oh, jeez.
Luckily, we have a job waiting at the other end. But
exactly.
Yeah, it's tough for sure.
It's a lot of work, and I don't mind the work. But it's just like we have some pretty grand ambitions for the sport and the industry. And running a race team was part of it, but I think it's time to start setting up the other aspects of some of the stuff we got in store, some of the stuff we're planning. And so this will kind of be a step in that direction to take that step back away from the retail customers and start maybe providing more support and more help towards a distribution and a dealer program that is better channeled, better structured, better set up than what the Italians are providing. Like he said, kind of in this transition phase where, you know, we're actually taking a few steps back from the race team side of things. Like we went pretty hard there on the race team for really like the last 7 or 8 years. You know, really learned a lot, you know, about the industry and about chassis and manufacturing and racing and setups and all that stuff. And, you know, now we're at a point where like we could keep doing the same thing. And, you know, we had some pretty long discussions last year and almost pulled the trigger a couple times, but went some different routes. And beginning of this year basically just said, you know, it's time we, you know, kind of put this to the side and, you know, I'm going to start my new thing here and, you know, really dive into the deep end of chassis manufacturing because, you know, I'm just going to jump into it. But
now or never.
Yeah. And it's, you know, I think the time is right that, you know, we've been through this same cycle, you know, multiple times now with a couple different manufacturers of, you know, the beginning, the middle, and the end. And it's just they can never really meet or supply what the American market is after. And I think there's, you know, the knowledge that I have and the background in manufacturing that my father has, you know, kind of the what we can put together and what I know the American market needs, with our tire, our tracks, our engines. It's not to say that the Italian products are bad. It's just they're not exactly made for what we're using them for. So with that, we'll be. I think by the time this comes out, our official first race will be at LAKC on the 26th, and then the official debut. We'll probably start doing some more social media stuff like that during the Pro Tour in August. But yeah, the new company will be called Factory Karts of America. It'll be all American built, American metal, all built in-house, welded, bent.
And is you getting a little bit older? Does that have anything to do with that?
100%,
A little bit?
yeah.
Yeah. Priorities, right? We're starting to...
How old are you now? 20?
I am 28.
28,
Yep.
okay.
That's nuts.
I know, right?
You were that young when I first met you? You're just barely clicking off in the 20s?
Yeah,
Because I started here in 2011. You were that young?
Yeah, so I was
Good golly.
born in 91. So I was 20 in 2011. Really 19, and then 2000, because my birthday is December 28th, 91.
Wow.
So yeah, I didn't get into a go-kart for my first time until I was 16 years old.
Oh, we're going to come back to that kind of stuff. That's
So,
awesome.
Yeah, I was definitely a late starter. But yeah, I remember 2011 when you came in. I still didn't even really know what was going on. I just drove go-karts for fun, and
Right.
I was kind of fast, but I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I was
Yeah,
just
you were learning
grabbing
from
gears and
Dad was killing it.
yeah, he was
Yeah.
killing it. Exactly. I was just
Willie was the Musgrave everybody knew about.
exactly.
Let's doing a big time rewind here. I want to go all the way back to Little Billy and also the kind of stuff. How did you you born into it? What's early days Billy Musgrave and earliest racing memory?
I mean, quite literally, I think I literally learned how to ride a motorcycle before I learned how to ride a bicycle. At 3 years old or 4 years old. My dad used to put me on the front of his bike and ride me around. And then I had this little PW50 that I learned how to ride with training wheels and stuff. I think
You guys put training wheels on the motorcycle before
They
you
do.
put training wheels on the bicycle.
Yeah, that might say something about me.
They probably owned a motorcycle before a bicycle, too.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, 100%. But I think my first actual racing memory is I think I was 5 years old, just turned 5. I was racing a PW50, which is little tiny Yamahas. They're super slow, but back when I was growing up, it was just booming at that point. So there's always a bunch of anywhere you go, any small little club race would be freaking 15, 20 little PW50 kids
Right.
racing out
So
there.
those little pit bikes that they have, basically.
Yeah, the little kids. Yeah, you just they're 4 strokes. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
Just kind of putt around. But I vaguely remember getting a trophy. I don't even know if I finished or if it was a participation trophy or if I got third. I literally don't remember. But I remember just being so proud and so happy, and all I wanted to do was race again. I was like, when can we race again? And they're like,
Nice.
not till next week. And I'm like, oh, but I want to race again right now. And then from there, I mean, it's just my dad was super, super heavily involved in the motorcycle industry. From putting together White Brothers, working pretty involved with Pro Circuit and their exhaust pipe production line, and then with the distribution company MTA for over a decade. So I mean, as I grew up, I was just always around it, and he was always a test rider for Motocross Action magazine, and the editor of Motocross Action, Jody Weisel, he lived across the street from us. So growing up, I was the kid. I just had that relationship with them, and as I grew up into the 65s and the 85s and stuff like that, we were racing. I literally raced once or twice a week, every week of my life, from when I was probably about 6 or 7 until I was 20.
Was it just you and the pops going to the track,
Yeah,
or you?
literally
Okay.
back of the truck, 2 bikes. I mean, every weekend, practice once or twice a week, go
Nice.
race, on the weekend, Saturday or Sunday.
And your dad's running this, so he's doing all other kind of stuff, working, but he's
Yep.
racing the entire time as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah?
Yeah. Hardcore. And it's one of the things I look back on now, and I'm actually super thankful of. Not to say anything bad about the parents that go all in on just their kid racing, but for me growing up, it was always more about my dad racing, and him doing the testing and development for all the products and projects that he was working on, and I was just there to have fun. I was just there to kind of hang out with him and hang out with there's a bunch of older guys at Motocross Action and just the people we knew and the friends I had. growing up. Like I grew up with Brian Papalardo's and his kid Bradley. I mean, there's a group of us. I mean, I've known him since I was literally like 7 years old.
Oh wow.
And it was just that kind of atmosphere. It's like, we race on the weekends and we try to win and like go fast and stuff. But like, there was no pressure. It was always pretty mellow. And like, my dad was always very much, go as fast as you can and always try to be better, but don't like, burn yourself out. Don't, I'm not going to be the dad that's yelling at you at the side or throwing rocks at you because you didn't jump that triple or stuff like that. It was always super, super, just kind of friendly and mellow. And like, when you're ready, you'll be ready.
Well, unlike a lot of the other guests that we've had and whatnot, where they started in karting when they were a kid, you started in motocross.
Yeah.
Now, I ask everybody else, when you were a munchkin, when you first get going, did you want to be a race car driver? In this case, are you like, I want to be McGrath or whatever?
Of course, 100%. Every kid, 7 years old, like, I want to be, Jeremy McGrath. Or
so you want to have, you're just out there to have fun, but at the same token, it's like, no, maybe I can actually be.
Yeah. And like, I remember racing 50s against, Michael Lessie and, a bunch of the Supercross guys that are out there now. I mean, when I was
50s, when you were a munchkin.
Yeah, little, and then like 65s and 85s against, like my era was kind of more like the Ryan Villapotos, the Cole Seeleys,
cool.
That era of guys. So I was never at their level. They were, unreal on a mini bike. But, I would line up on the gate next to them. I'd be somewhat competitive. But I was never, like, at that age, I just wasn't really that, I just rode stock stuff and just had a good time and did the best I could and just learned. And, it was, I think one thing my dad really understood was the amount of hours it takes to really get good at something and really understand it. So, instead of throwing, all your dollars and cents at something before you're ready, it was just like, he wanted me to do it at my own pace and me to do it, so I kept wanting to come back to the track. So it was fun. It wasn't something that was stressful or, intimidating. It was like, I wanted to win, but it was because I wanted to win, not because, he was making me or forcing me to do it. That pressure was never really there. And I'm super thankful for that looking back, just that whole atmosphere and like learning to appreciate, learning to value like the method of racing and like how to learn to go faster and like really just kind of learning that, on my own without too much of that stress or like driver coaches and all that craziness that, happens so often. And like as I got older, anybody back to motocross stuff, it's like as I grew up into the 65s and 85s, like there's actually, I think somebody found a picture of it on one of the tests I did. But like I would always be testing stuff for Jody and like writing little articles, and that's just the way I grew up.
And how old roughly?
Probably from when I was 9 or 10 all the way till I was 20.
So you're right around 10 years old.
Yeah.
And you're doing, so your dad's testing adult bikes,
Yep.
and you're
And
testing the munchkin bikes.
Exactly. So we do little shootouts. So like, a proper motocross test, the magazines would get bikes from the manufacturer and like, they would have their new 85s or 65s or whatever. And we would line them up and we would spend literally 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months sometimes, like testing every bike back to back, racing with it, living with it. And I'd be writing my notes and my articles, what I liked about this bike, what I liked about that bike.
No way.
By no means was it like super well worded or like sophisticated, but like for me, it taught me that value of like, instead of just riding the same thing every week. There was times where I would practice on one bike, race my first moto on another bike, and race my second moto on a third bike. Or do 2 classes and run, all 5 different bikes in the same day. And that was something my dad was always super, he just wanted me to learn for myself because, telling somebody, how to test or how to feel that stuff, the words only go so far. Like you have to actually personally experience that. So, the weight of a bike, how tall it sits off the ground, how the handlebars feel in your hand, how the throttle response is, how the brakes feel, how it corners. So, like I had written some stuff. It's funny reading back on it, but, sometimes the fastest bikes aren't always the best bikes. Sometimes the ones that have the best suspension aren't necessarily the fastest. And just learning like what a whole package and like how to test that and come to those conclusions.
So you're a tester early on.
Yeah.
But you're doing the racing thing for fun.
Yep.
But you want to be this McGrath, etc. But you don't have the same stuff that you or did you even know that you were on stock stuff and you didn't have?
Yeah. No, we were intentionally on stock stuff. the most we did, there's a couple years there where we got a little bit serious with the 85 stuff. I had my moments where I was pretty quick. So maybe we got some suspension done. Pro Circuit helped us out a little bit. I had some engine work done on a couple bikes, but nothing too crazy. I had some pretty good races around, pretty good stuff at Mammoth and some other big mini races, but I never really did like Loretta's or did all the national mini events.
Was there a switch flip for you where you started taking it more seriously and wanted to pursue it? Or?
It actually was. So, my dad was he was always the guy that, a lot of kids in motocross will like kind of hold their kids back. I think you see it in karting too. It's like, the kid's like 13 racing mini Swift still.
Right.
So a lot of that happens in motocross too. The kid will be freaking 14 still on an 85.
Right.
And I was always
Years
the opposite.
On the package.
Yeah, exactly. I was always like, if I'm tall enough to start it, I can ride it. So like I remember being 13 years old and racing a CRF 450. Not being good at it, but learning how to control the power and just learning that, so that later on, if I go back and race a 125, you have a new perspective on. I was just actually talking this with Vicente over the weekend, like how racing different vehicles and different platforms gives you a different perspective on whatever it is you're focusing on. And then karting, it's the same thing. You drive a 175, a 250, a shifter kart, and you go back to your KA100 or your X30, and it's like, oh, it's not scary anymore. Now I can push it to the limit all the time.
Yeah.
Or I can understand why sometimes different lines are better or different setups are better. So just to give yourself that experience and that racing perspective. But for me, I really started taking it seriously probably when I was around 16, 17. And I was on the bigger bikes. I turned pro, I think, when I was like about 17.
What does turning pro mean in motocross?
I mean, it's funny. Motocross is just like, what class are you going to enter today?
Oh,
I'm going to enter pro class today. Yeah,
gotcha.
It's no sophisticated licensing program or nothing like that.
Is it more about like what level?
How fast you are.
Oh, okay.
Literally. So, I mean, it's like if you think you can run with those guys, then, hey, by all means, go try to run with them. So, we were pretty fortunate. Like, we always raced out at Glen Helen. And like REM Saturday Motocross, or like, there's another series that Craig Davis used to run that we'd travel on the Sunday. So a lot of times we'd race REM on Saturday and then go to a different track on Sunday and race there as well. And like we would get some really fast riders, especially at certain times of the year when guys are looking to test a little bit or, get ready for the Nationals or the Supercross or stuff like that.
Just like a club race here.
You'd literally have them. Exactly. You'd have the fast guys show up and be like, oh, crap. Like, he's here today. Like, okay, cool. Let me see, how fast I am. And
there's a benchmark for you.
Exactly.
For sure.
Exactly. So, I won some pretty good races against some pretty fast guys. And there was a few years there where I was taking it pretty seriously. And I think, actually, like 2012 was kind of that transition year. I just turned 20. And I remember going to at the time, there was a world two-stroke championship race. So it was like this big, two-stroke only motorcycle race that was like a lot of big names came to. I remember Michael Lieb, and there was actually some pretty fast guys there. And I actually ended up getting fourth. And for me, that was pretty cool. Like, I was pretty stoked on that. And, like, things were starting to go a little bit. And then, like, 2 months later, I broke my femur.
You're right.
And
in a cart.
In a go-kart at some unnamed go-kart track. In someone's unnamed go-kart.
So what was the in 20, this is like the third or fourth whatever year of you're starting to take the motocross stuff a little bit more seriously. What makes you go jump in a go-kart?
So we had actually, around that same time, around when I was 16, was when we first kind of got into the go-karts. And we just kind of dabbled in it because, you do motocross for so long, you can get a little burnt out.
Well, yeah.
Right.
So talk about that. How did you even find out about go-karts? How did you even get into them in the first place?
Honestly, somebody had come into somebody from Adams Kart Track came into.
There it is again.
Came into my dad's MTA shop, the warehouse, while we were working, and they like handed out these little booklets, these little coupon booklets. You pay $20 for this book of coupons, and you get $100 worth of discounts, whatever.
Just for like the arrive and drive stuff.
Yeah,
over there?
back when they had their rental carts, they were never great, but we went out and did it a couple times. My dad, my mom, my sister, and me, and just the rental carts were like, whoa, this is pretty cool. I mean, we had done K1 and pole position and stuff, and it's like, oh, that's cool, but like, yeah. It's just good every once in a while. And the go-kart thing was like, whoa, wow, I didn't even know this existed. Like, I had no idea. Like, there's actual go-kart tracks.
And do they have other stuff going on there? Like, were you doing the arrive and drive, and then they actually had like a shifter or something go by?
Exactly. And my dad saw the shifter cart, and he's like, oh, dang, that looks pretty cool. Like, that actually seems like something that would be like a motorcycle on four wheels. And they have a motorcycle engine on the go-kart. And man, I gotta look into this a little bit more.
So you're 16, so we're talking about 2008ish.
Yeah, exactly,
Right
exactly. So I was actually just like right in the middle of high school. And so I was pretty much focused on motocross at the time, but like dabbled in the go-kart stuff. My dad picked up some actually like a old used Sodi kart from actually Tom when he ran extreme karting before he even opened or took over SKUSA and all that stuff. And like ever since we got that shifter kart, drove it the first time, I think out at Moran, or maybe even here. I honestly don't remember. Oh, he was hooked. He's like, oh my God, this is awesome. Like this just brings me back to when I first was getting on a motorcycle, that feeling of intensity and adrenaline and just being that close to the ground. It is cool. And I think I dabbled around, because everybody was saying like, don't start in a shifter kart, have them try this other stuff. So I tried like a KT100 and some stuff like that, some tag karts. I think I actually ended up getting Travis Irving's old top kart with a leopard in it or something like that.
Oh wow.
Drove that for literally a couple months, blew it up a couple times, and then finally drove my dad's shifter kart, and I was like, oh, I want to drive this now.
So your dad jumped right into the shifter.
He jumped right into the shifter.
And then how do you start off in the single speed
stuff?
Yeah,
exactly. And I did actually start off in the single speed stuff for like literally 2 or 3 months.
Did you do any racing, or was it just some practice
days?
days?
Just some practice days and stuff like that. Maybe try to race. But those leopards I just remember they always blew up at the end of the straightaway at Moran. So I dropped in his shifter kart, and I was like, oh man, this is cool. Like we need to get some of these. So he found some, I think he hooked up with Ryan and Rod at Two Wild, got some aero karts, some 08 AX9 or whatever aero karts. And then
that's what I remember you guys being on first was
the
arrows.
Yeah.
And that was what Ryan mentioned too in his episode, him selling you guys the arrows.
Yeah. And man, we kept those things for like 3 or 4 years, and they were awesome. I mean, honestly, like, dude, they were awesome, and Ryan and Rod were super helpful. They were shifter kart guys at the time, so they're like, oh yeah, dude, you guys are motocross guys. Here's some shifter karts. You'll love it. Like, boom. So they helped us a lot, learned a lot from them. And it was, we just kind of did it on the weekends for fun, just to kind of take a step back from motocross. And,
was it like, is it a training tool, or is it literally just kind of relaxing, like almost getting away
just
from
another hobby?
It literally was
distraction.
Both.
Because your dad's still racing the motocross at this time.
Yeah,
still
pretty hardcore too. And so was I. And it was like, part of it was to take the step back and make sure, don't get too burnt out on the moto stuff. You get a little frustrated with some of the track conditions and races and stuff like that. But also, we never would have thought at the time, but like once you started driving and then you got back to the motocross track, you really start approaching the apexes and the corners differently.
Oh.
It's like if you only know motocross and you're just stuck in this path of like ruts and berms and blah, 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 it's weird how different asphalt changes the way you perceive an apex and you perceive a corner.
That's so interesting because you guys actually brought that to shifter kart racing, at least
and
to Cal
vice versa.
Speed,
yeah.
Because just the one corner it pops in my head is hairpin.
Yep.
Where you guys go full shallow,
yep.
and everybody else is doing
tagline.
the standard tagline, and that's the way you do it. And then you guys would pull these down the inside, like, oh, are they trying to pass? No. They would just drop down at first, rotate the car, and bang, gears coming off.
Yeah.
And that actually, people start gravitating that direction a little bit. That's interesting.
Wow.
So that's what was so cool is like, then you go to the motocross track and you start opening up some of the lines. Some of the turns you start opening up and carrying more speed and all this stuff. And then you come to the go-kart track and it's like, okay, we could do some of those lines, but like, yeah, what if we try just jamming it up the inside in this turn and dropping it down a gear? Maybe the track's super slippery, so you can't carry that kind of speed. Same thing with a motocross track when it gets like watered and blue grooved and all that stuff. It's like, okay, you can't carry a bunch of roll speed, so instead just drive it in, park it, and go. So it really just kind of opened your mind, and like I was explaining before, it's that perspective on racing and
100%.
And like jumping in all these other different disciplines really gives you a new perspective when you go back to whatever your core discipline or racing is.
That was what when we talked to Matt Johnson, that was what he said about, and same thing with Crow actually, about dropping down and driving the 206.
Yep.
When they went back to their 175 or their X30, they're like that much more precise.
Yep.
So
you have to be in it, and you're maybe going slower, but there's nothing wrong with that because you're learning more about exactly where to put the car, and like you're really feeling inch by inch the changes in grip on the track instead of just blindly kind of throwing the cart in there.
Mm-hmm.
So you get into the kart deal, and it's purely almost to kind of get away from the focus of moto. It's about, hey, we're going to go for championships. You're trying to like work your way up through the deal.
Yep.
Obviously, Dad's getting after it, and you guys are going to the moto track, and this is the program. We're all in right here.
Yep.
And we're going to go have fun in the karts, and that's all it is.
Yes.
When does that switch from it's just for fun to, no, we're going to go racing in these. And again, I mean, we kind of put a point on that. You were turning pro, you're taking it pretty serious, you break your leg.
Yeah.
Does it all kind of come together?
It literally was the defining moment. 'Cause, I broke my femur, I think it was June 2012, in the lovely turn 1 over to our left. And in Mr. Irving's go-kart.
The aforementioned unnamed stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, long story. Don't drive go-karts that you don't fit in, and the brakes may or may
Mike
not
made
work
it work
very
the
well.
other day.
Nice. Yeah,
That's
I wasn't
taking your life in your own hands right there.
Yeah, nice.
I knew what I was getting into. It was only 100 cc's.
Oh, exactly. And no, that was just, honestly, I take 100%. I was being stupid on my part. But that literally was. So, broke my femur. Out of all the bones I've broken wrists, ankles, tib and fib, multiple collarbones, fingers, all that kind of stuff.
So that's so funny because I'm sure most of these injuries happened from motocross, right?
Pretty much 100%, yeah.
It takes the one karting incident. You're like, I'm getting out of motocross.
Dude. 'Cause yeah.
Exactly. He breaks his leg out here and goes all in karting.
Yeah.
Some weird reverse psychology right
most
there.
parents are here like, oh, this is too dangerous. And then they take the kid into soccer and he breaks his arm. It's like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, exactly.
I guess you're going away from jumping stuff if you at least get it on the ground.
And it's one of those things where it's like, even when it happened, it's like, yeah, that was my fault.
Right,
It's not
yeah,
like
yeah.
it was the track's fault. It was the go-kart's fault.
I
It was
watched
like,
it happen. It was
"No,
all your fault.
That one's on me. Like, I am not worried about doing that again because I'll be smarter next time.
You're trying to drive it like a dirt bike. It just didn't work out.
Exactly. Exactly.
I can't remember. Did you race LAKC in 11? I can't remember if you were racing
We actually
yet.
raced LAKC. I've raced LAKC every year since 08.
Oh, no
Oh,
way.
wow.
Okay.
Oh, cool.
Yep. I remember my dad.
So you guys were actually even the racing stuff. When you would come out and
Yeah,
do
we
the
literally
races, it was
we
still just for
practiced
fun.
a little bit, but we literally would just show
Show up.
up and not even practice the day before and
You
just
know,
race for fun. Because we
got
just like
it.
racing. We were like, dude, the best thing about the shifter cart is lining up on the grid and there's 10 or 20 of us and you're like, dude, standing start with the flag or the lights, like, dude, this is awesome. It's cool. Like it just gave us this whole new
gotcha.
perspective, and it's like
I
that's
gotcha.
what we wanted. It was like we didn't really care about tuning the go-karts or tire pressures or doing all that crap. We're just like,
You were roving.
yeah, we just want to
yourself,
drive
yeah.
wheel to wheel and bang and bump and
I gotcha.
man, that was awesome. High five each other after the race.
So
and
you guys are going karting and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
you're not getting overly serious. I mean, I think still though, you guys are at the sharp end. I think Willie's at the sharp end for the Masters group, stuff
Yeah.
like that, LAKC.
Yeah.
But it's not. It doesn't turn from the motocross focus to all in karts until this incident. And
yeah.
it kind of sounds like, we joke about you have this injury in karts, but you stay in karts.
Yeah.
Was it maybe an opportunity you lost on the motocross side? Is that more of what the deal was?
Maybe a little bit, and it was, with the age and the timing and stuff like that, to get back on a bike after a femur is, that's months and months and months. That's 4 to 6 months, even with, I was pretty fortunate. I think 2 or 3 days after I broke it, they came back in and put a rod through the leg, and I spiral fractured it, so it was basically shattered the whole bone. But they put a rod through what was left and then put some pins in my knee and my hip. Laid on the couch for about 2.5 weeks. And then the third week I got, up off the couch, was, walking around in the pool, just trying to move it around a little bit. Came out to the track on crutches. I posted a photo a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Literally the
Right.
first day I was back out. And I remember 4 weeks later, I was actually back in a go-kart driving. And 5 weeks later, I was racing LAKC.
Get out.
Yeah. And it was out of all the bones I've broken, that's a testament to modern medical science, but it was the fastest healing and quickest recovery I've ever, been in. And part of that was because the go-kart, we just padded the seat up and made sure my leg wasn't bouncing around too much. And it was we could drive. Where a motorcycle, with the rod in there, and they were pretty serious, one wrong move or one wrong landing.
Oh,
And
man.
that rod bends, and you got some really serious problems for the rest of your life.
Gotcha.
So that was to get back on a motorcycle, that has to be 100%. To get back in a go-kart,
Speaking of getting back on,
not so much.
Do you do any of that two-wheel stuff
I was going
anymore?
to ask, yeah.
After all that, at the end of that year, I think a couple times I got back on a bike, maybe 3 or 4 times. But then we showed up at SuperNats that year and ended up winning in 2012. And literally since then, I don't think I've actually ridden or raced a
Get
couple
out.
times in the parking lot of our shop, right?
Yeah.
Doing some stuff for customers, but never like I literally.
Just no desire to anymore.
You're a decade and a half into being on two wheels.
Yeah.
Plus, no, yeah, well, I bet,
Yeah,
yeah,
15
decade and a
years.
half,
Yep.
and piss on it.
Yep.
You're
Yep.
done.
And it was, if we didn't have the karting thing, it definitely would have been a totally different story. I would have been a lot more fired up to get back on the bike, but it was like karting filled that void. And it was like, now I have this other thing that's actually a little bit more technical. And I put, the rest of that year, basically from August or whenever until November, I just drove the go-kart, twice a week and, finished out all the races that we could. And
Was this still on the Aero?
I think right at that point we just gotten some Tony karts from
Okay.
Ryan, some of the new 2012 Tony karts or whatever. Yeah, 2012 Tony karts. And so I really liked those compared to the Arrows. It was like, oh man, this thing's pretty good actually. Like I can feel it bending and twisting and stuff, and like I was dabbling with setups and stuff like that.
And so far, that was the second go-kart you'd ever driven. So kind of going
Yeah,
back to
I
your
played
early...
with like some CRG and some stuff
Okay.
like that, but I'd always kind of just gravitated right back to that same Arrow kart.
So you break your leg, get healthy enough to go
Yep.
drive, and then basically your PT is out here driving and
Literally,
doing stuff.
yeah.
But you go full on just drive,
Yep.
and it's that same year you
Yep.
get SuperNats
Yep.
in S2, right?
Yep, exactly. So
Wow.
I broke my leg and I remember because we had actually done a Pro Tour race for fun in I want to say May 1st. There was a Pro Tour race in Phoenix that year, and I remember I showed up with the Arrow. It was all like welded together. They just had a problem with the chassis cracking, but I mean, heck, we drove the thing for 4 years, so can't really.
It's time.
Go figure.
Exactly. So I mean, we show up there and the thing's all welded together, and I'm like, I don't care. I just want to go have fun. I just want to go race. And that was back. S2 was a pretty big field. I think I actually won one of the days on that Arrow. The thing was so bad on new tires to qualify like outside the top 10 because the thing was just so overstock. But as the tires wore out, it actually got faster and faster. And, not because I knew any better, just kind of got lucky. But I was driving the wheels off it and having some fun.
Day two,
and that
he's
was
like,
in
put the
May.
old skins on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
literally, yes, literally. Like we'd put new tires on and go slower. It was like we did not understand how to drive.
Wow.
But yeah, so like we had won that, and then I broke the femur about a month later. So I missed out on the SuperNats. I think it was in Utah, Colorado,
That's right,
or
because
something.
back
that year.
then it was spring,
Spring,
summer,
summer.
and Super was all the Pro
part
Tour.
of it. Exactly. So I missed the
Gotcha.
Pro Tour Championship because I missed the summer. But yeah, we definitely wanted to do SuperNats because we had been in karting for 4 years now, and everybody talks about how great SuperNats is. And it's like, man,
That was your first one, too.
yeah, I'd never been
Oh,
before.
gotcha.
I never even showed up, never even saw the race,
Yeah,
nothing.
yeah.
Like more than a couple of pictures that people had, but like literally had no idea what it was. I just knew it was some go-kart race that was really big in Vegas. I don't know. And ever since we got in it, Ryan and Rod and all the people around the pits were always like, "Man, SuperNats is where it's at." Like that. If you've never done it, that's like the Supercross of go-karts. And they're like, "Okay, cool. So we're gonna go give it the
They're
shot."
just baiting you with the Supercross,
Pre-
right?
Pretty much, exactly. But it really is. I mean,
Yeah,
temporary track in a parking lot with kind of a stadium style setup on
So-
all the pits and stuff.
You're going in there and you're on a Tony now, or you're still in the Aero?
On the Tony kart.
Okay.
From Ryan and Rod.
Did you feel like you were gonna do good, or you just kind of
well,
like
so
another race,
funny-
go have fun?
Funny story. So we actually showed up. I don't even think we pre-entered. I think we showed up at the race, post entry at SuperNats. That's a funny one, isn't it? Just showed up
Musgraves.
because we didn't even know. Like we were just like a week or two before. Didn't know if we could get the time off work and all that stuff. And we're like, okay, cool, we can do it. Let's go. Get all our stuff together. Show up. Literally pitted in the back of our trailer, like almost as far away from, like literally the back corner, like as far away as you can get on top of the.
What venue
hill.
is it right now?
It was at the Rio.
Okay.
Yeah, it was at the Rio. And we didn't know. We just were there to have a good time and have some fun. So post entered, and I tried to enter an S1. And I remember Patty was like, "Well, you haven't really done a full season in S2, and like, you won a Pro Tour race, but like, you should probably just do S2 this year, and next year you can do S1." And like, I was like, "Well, I really would just want to race S1. Like, I want to see how good I am."
So in motocross, the way it works is
You just show up and drive pro and you're good to
Yeah.
go. So I didn't understand this whole licensing thing. And I'm like, well, I mean, if you say so, like, okay. So they made me run S2. And yeah, I remember there were some fast names there. I mean, I remember Kinnear was quick. Sabra, of course. there's like 3 or 4 other drivers that are still driving, still racing now,
Right.
that were in that mix. I remember Remo up from Canada.
Oh yeah.
So there were some pretty good S2 kids there. And I mean, like, we didn't really know what I was doing. Funny fact, Travis was actually, I think that was when he started doing his little Tony Kart. He was working with Tony Kart there for a minute. And so he was like calling me on the phone, like, hey, the Marco Artigo's doing this to the go-kart. You should try doing this. And like, you should try doing that. And I remember trying all this stuff through all the practices. And like, by the time we got to qualifying, we were always like top 5, top 10, but never really first. I remember Travis called me. He's like, hey man, just put the whole go-kart back to stock. They put the go-karts back to stock and they're going to go qualify. And I was like, God, like, really? Like, okay, fine.
That sounds like Travis now.
Yeah, 100%. I give him so much crap. But yeah, I didn't know any better. Like, I was just kind of doing what I was told. I could honestly not really even feel what was happening. I just knew like sometimes the go-kart was really slidey and sometimes it pushed.
So there was, up until that point, there was really no tuning you were doing on it.
Not on a massive scale.
Yeah, tire pressure and lube the chain
And fortunately
status.
for the Tony Kart stuff, I mean, even to this day, it's like run them box stock. They're probably going to be like 95% good. Like, you know what I mean? Especially in that condition. So I just remember throwing the whole thing back to stock right before quali and going out and putting it on pole. And I was like, oh, dang, that's pretty cool. And I think I won two of the 3 heat races or something like that, and ended up winning the main event. And it was like on that drive home, we're just like, wow, that was freaking cool. That was awesome.
It was nothing you expected either.
No. And I mean, I had showed up. I just wanted to run mid-pack and S1 and just like have some racing and see how good I was against, Fritz and some of those guys back then and Joey and see where I was at.
This may be a tough question to answer, but where do you think you would have placed at? Just going off of pace and how you felt at the end of the weekend. If you're leaving, you're like, I could have been top 5 S1 or top 10.
I remember the talk of the pits was I had out-qualified all the S1 guys.
No
in
shit.
S2. Yeah. By like 2/10.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's not too tough of a question,
No.
Derek.
Yeah, well, only once.
So I remember being like, dang it, I should have drove S1.
Yeah.
But I mean, who knows? Time of
Patty.
day. I know, time of day
Change
and all
the
that
number.
other stuff. But it was, I remember, I think Howden was there and they were all talking
That's
about
awesome,
it and making it a
man.
big deal. And I was like, I don't know.
Billy Musgrave's over there with Patty, and she's like, well, you should probably run S2. And he's like, why not both?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
The little girl and the meme or the gift.
Yeah.
Dude, exactly.
Oh, man.
But
So-
I just remember driving home, and like halfway home, like we were just passing through Prim, I think, and like the phones just start ringing, and like my dad's phone's ringing, my phone's ringing. It's just like phone call, phone call, phone call, phone call, phone call. People just asking about.
It's actually tech telling you to come back.
Exactly.
They found something illegal.
Yeah. I remember we had this. That was the first time at any race in like the history of ever, where we actually went through tech, because in motocross this does not happen. Like you go through tech and they're like, okay, yeah, pull the motor off and split the cases. My dad was like, what, really? Like, you guys do this? And they're like, yeah, split the cases. Like, we want to see the crank and make sure you didn't modify the transmission and all this other stuff.
So you went from not really being
wow,
through
that's cool.
tech to the deep end of the pool. on
Yeah,
tech,
exactly.
yeah.
I was like, man, I wish they did this in Moto, because man, some of the stuff going on over there is
Yeah.
a little suspicious. But that was really cool. I was like, man, they really do a good job of making sure that people aren't cheating and stuff like that. And like we had just started, I think my dad had just started like kind of doing the motor stuff himself. The main thing with the Hondas was plugging the power valves. So you'd like go into the cylinders and like hand file these little plugs that we had made and like fit them up into the cylinders and make it all nice and smooth and perfect. And he had just started doing that himself. And I think at the time, like really SwedeTech and Darcy were like the only guys doing it. And with as popular as the Honda stuff was, there was like a waiting list. You know what I mean?
Was that
Right.
was that a quote MRC motor? Like, did you
Yeah.
have the badging and everything at that time?
I remember that. I don't even know if we had a sticker back then. I don't think MRC was a thing.
That's
Maybe
what
it
I'm
was
Because you're
just
still with Too Wild,
So it-
essentially.
yeah, exactly. We were still
right.
too wild. Yeah.
It was built by Willie, but it wasn't an MRC product
Not
yet.
really. I don't even think it had a sticker on it.
Got
I have to look at some of the pictures. Maybe MRC was a thing, because we were doing like radiators and hose kits or something like that. But back
Okay.
then it was all under like STI and some other names.
Right.
But yeah, I remember like on the way home, people were just calling because like, man, can you do cylinders for us? Can you do motor work for us? And this
Wow.
was like one of the first engines that my dad actually like, because he knew the guys at HPD or whatever, and he's like, called him like, I want, like, you could just buy a motor kit. You could just buy like, hey, this is the part number, and the pieces show up to you in like a million pieces, and you got to put it together. It's like that was just one of those motors that he put together. And so I just remember the phone calls coming through and just being like, man, can you build us a motor? Can you do this? Can you do that? little driver coaching and testing and stuff like that. I was like, well, yeah, I don't mind. So in the beginning, we just kind of started as, just kind of a motor and tuning kind of shop, literally out of our garage.
Is this 13?
This would be like end of 12 and then beginning of 13. We actually, Travis is actually nice enough. He was just getting out of his NASCAR stuff, and he let us use his shop to kind of expand a little bit. So we had some carts over there. Started doing some stuff out of his garage, quickly outgrew that, and then moved into some buildings in Corona, I think about halfway through 13. And then like 2,000 square foot building,
so
4,000.
You said going into SuperNats in 12, you weren't sure like if we can get the time off work and stuff like this. So what are you doing at the end of 12? And obviously this experience, you're okay, you win and all these different things. The coin gets flipped in a big way.
Yes.
So what's your dad doing? What are you doing that you guys can just go, we're going to do a kart shop or kart team or what have you?
Yeah, so it's actually with the whole MTA distribution company thing, the company had just gotten bought out by this big Canadian distributor. So like right at the end of 12, like all that transition stuff was starting to go on, and like there's some pretty bad dealings, and
so maybe the timing was...
Yeah, my dad kind of got the short end of the stick on that one. Was promised a lot, and like, they kind of just let him go and kicked him out and said,
we'll ask him on the Willie episode.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was not so cool. So, literally with like, a couple $1,000. Like, no money. It's not like we had, 6 figures or 50 grand or something like that to go start this with. It was literally a couple $1,000. We're like, well, let's buy some engine parts and, buy some hose kits and the radiators. He got that stuff that he had designed and developed for MTA. He had, they had just given that back. It's like, we don't want to do anything with karting.
Okay, so real quick, sorry, then that's a good point. So you're already doing, it's the full radiator itself?
Yeah.
The full radiator hoses.
Yep.
Mounting kits or whatever. You already have some karting products.
Yes, exactly. Because like back earlier in I want to say late 11, early 12, my dad was always trying to like do different stuff, or like, with the distribution company, it's all just about numbers. It's like a little bit here, a little bit there, but at the end of the day, you just want turns and numbers.
Yeah.
So, he got into karting a little bit, and he was like, well, hey, we could make some karting radiators. We can make some hose kits, and from vendors that we already knew and were dealing with. So it was just something to add to that pile. And the people there didn't really get it, especially the other company that was coming in. And so like, you just take this stuff and, we're just going to stick to power sports or whatever. So yeah, we had that couple little products. Like I remember the mounting kits and stuff like that, the radiator mounts that were pretty cool and they were strong and they didn't break. So when we got into karting, we were always trying to fix these little problems of like, instead of having to take a Honda head and like, literally epoxy one of the holes and use one, washing machine freaking radiator hose. It was like, no, let's make a pretty cool silicone hose kit that looks cool. It has a little Y that goes into both outlets,
and it comes in many colors.
Exactly. So it's just like we wanted to do like some of these cool things, so that way some of the stuff was a little bit more universal, and you could a little bit more interchangeable. The radiators didn't break so often, the mounts didn't break so often. And we just came up with little mounts and stuff like that, little fuel pump mounts and CDI mounts and motor mounts, pipe mounts, silencer mounts, just little mounts and stuff like that nobody was really doing. A lot of the stuff was just kind of fabbed up in somebody's garage and everything was blown off.
Well, it's speaking of somebody's garage, which is kind of what you guys were. So does that mean you guys are not doing these things in-house? This is designed in-house?
It's designed in-house, and then we were just jobbing out. Like my dad had some really good friends that run some CNC companies, so they would help us out.
So Musgrave Racing Company, that team, or MRC, it's these little other side
It's all these
pieces.
little accessories.
We haven't even gotten into a team. We haven't even thought about doing
Literally
a team.
nothing.
And then you go off and decide that you're going to be some kind of hot shot at SuperNats. Coincidentally, he has his own career issues with where he was at.
Yep.
What were you doing? At 20? I was literally
just going to
jobbing? Are you schooling?
Yeah, I was going to college part time, and literally just I was actually working in the warehouse of MTA, and I think earlier in the year, somewhere in the middle of 12, I was just like, it was getting a little toxic, or just things were changing, and I was just
it's time for something.
Yeah,
so
exactly. It's time for some other stuff. So I just kind of left.
Like, I know how to get out of this warehouse.
Exactly. But yeah, it was. I was going to college kind of part time, and I still was, I think, through 13. But eventually, we just started getting so busy with the go-kart stuff. It was like, man, this is going to be a full-time gig. And And like I said, so I mean, we quickly outgrew our garage, then Travis's garage, then 2,000 square foot building. And I think by like 14, we were already in like a 5,000, 5,500 square foot building.
This is in Corona.
In
still.
Corona, yeah, right by the Corona airport.
Because you were in Corona, and then you expanded also in Corona, right? You
yeah,
went to a different place.
Exactly. And we had a little bit bigger building through like 15 and 16. And man, outgrew that. It was just like every couple of years we kept outgrowing it. And then finally we found this place in Riverside because all the rent started going through the roof in Corona.
Right.
And we're like, man, let's I think we can handle. I think we can do it. So now we have like a 10,000 square foot building.
And that was all race team stuff, right?
Yeah,
race team
race
and all
team.
the other like the engine building and all these other parts, which
Yep.
is still outsourced.
Yeah.
Correct, right?
Yeah.
But engines are all in-house.
Yeah, engine. Yeah, it was all in house and the testing and development and all that stuff. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you're getting out the calls when you're leaving Vegas, and one of the things you mentioned was do you do coaching and all that. Had you done coaching before on the motocross stuff?
Literally never.
Wow.
I just rode. I just drove.
Okay.
Like I didn't really know. So the coaching thing, that was kind of new to me. I think like literally one of our first customers came and dropped his cart off and was like, come build this thing up for me. I think it was Alex King, actually, believe it or not. Super goofy dude. He's hilarious though. And then I remember John Franklin and man, a whole group of guys just kind of slowly kept coming to us to build them shifter cart
The
stuff.
word spreaded, yeah.
Exactly. And I remember I think Ryan and Rod, they were pretty busy with the tag stuff. I remember Ryan was racing shifter and tag a little bit. So we just kind of were handling all the shifter stuff. And we, in the beginning, we weren't really interested in doing any chassis stuff. We were just want to focus on the motors. But then the demand started coming. So eventually we, became a Tony Kart dealer ourselves and, just tried to keep up with, what people were asking out of us. And I just kind of learned by trial and error,
Right.
2013 Pro Tour races. I was literally we were just pitted by ourselves, me kind of by ourselves. I remember Alan Michelle, I think, was one of our first customers too. And, literally just kind of throwing our heads against the wall. Just trying axles and seats and stuff like that. And I just learned the hard way.
So 2013, you guys are running more. It's more of that. We're going karting. Now we're going karting. It's actually a little more of a business as well as other kinds of stuff. But you're on the Tony still, and you didn't get a chance to do the Pro Tour deal in 12 because of the leg deal. But going back to the conversation we had with Ryan, and actually the picture you had put up not too long ago of you having that broken leg.
Yep.
Tony Kart, etc. In the Ryan episode, or during the Ryan conversation, I remember him talking about actually you guys working with each other on a Pro Tour race or something like that in Colorado.
Oh yeah. I remember driving out to Colorado to Grand Junction with them in I want to say 2012 because I wasn't racing and because of the leg, and he was running S1 and he needed a mechanic. So I was like, yeah, I'll go. I'm like at that moment I'm just trying to learn more about go-karts and tuning and all that stuff. So I was like, yeah, heck yeah, I'll go. Make it a fun little trip. And yeah, I remember he was racing S1 against some. The field was stacked. You had Fritz and Scooby and Dyer, and
he said it wasn't a very good weekend.
Yeah, he struggled a little bit. And what's funny is I remember going back there in 13, and I remember struggling with the exact same stuff he was struggling with.
And you're racing in 13.
So now I'm racing this year, and I'm
on
like
the same chassis, or you're newer?
basically 2013 chassis. So I remember, we won 2012 SuperNats, and I remember driving home, and we had actually bought one of the factory carts. I think actually I bought Nick Neary's cart from SuperNats because he ran S1 that year. So it was like one of those factory, Tony Kart 2013
It's been
editions.
dunked in blessed water.
Exactly.
And
it was special.
From the Vatican.
And it was different.
Nice. Yeah.
But that was a damn good cart. But anyways, it was close enough to the rest of the Tony carts. They all kind of tuned the same. And I remember struggling with the same stuff, and I remember going through all of Saturday's racing, just struggling. And I remember Daniel Bray, Fritz. I think Bray actually won that year. It was the first win because Aluminos had just debuted in 2013 or 2012 SuperNats. And Bray won on Saturday with the Aluminos. It was a big deal and all that stuff. And I just struggled. Like 5th, 6th, 7th. Just could not quite find the speed. We were fast on Friday. And then as Saturday rolled around, we just slowed down.
Sorry, is this the opener for the 2013 season?
No, this is the Summer Nats. So I remember Spring Nats was that year we had the great race between Fritz, Joey, Sabra, and me. I think Rob Howden had like, some video of it with the onboard footage and the announcing, and it kind of made the rounds.
Okay.
If you kind of remember that, like I think I ended up third or fourth or something like that.
So you guys didn't have a problem with the chassis or anything like that at was it Phoenix?
We did, but we didn't really know it.
Okay.
Like, I did, but I didn't. I was still learning.
So there's something about Grand Junction that didn't like the 2013 Tonys.
Yes, and mainly the Pro Tour in that day and age, the Pro Tour. I don't know if I want to say structure, just the way that the rubber got laid down. The Tony cars would be really fast on Friday, and then like the setups that we had on them, they would just start to slow down a little bit on Saturday.
The grip got higher.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Chassis was a little bit too soft for those kind of grip conditions.
And so that's why Ryan had an off weekend.
Yes,
It
exactly.
was all about...
He was struggling. I mean, he was actually really fast on Friday, if I remember, and then just as the weekend went on, just was struggling as more and more rubber came down. And like that's when the CRG started really, like, man, I think Fritz was almost unbeatable on that CRG on Saturday, Sunday. I mean, almost won every Pro Tour main event that year, just because he could make it work in that rubber. I mean, the thing would just cut through the rubber wall. And that was back in the day where we hadn't quite perfected the Honda stuff. So, they were getting bogged down a little bit in the rubber, starting to lose that horsepower, lose that drive out of the corner. So if you could keep the chassis free and cut through the rubber, like, ooh, that's fast. Like, free is fast. That's what's going through my head. And so I remember this was like a key moment in my tuning, history, in my, learning experience. At the track Saturday after the main event, it's just struggle. I mean, the car just, was fast for like 6 laps and then just dropped anchor. We're just freaking along for the ride. Watch the guys in front of me just drive away. And just like really studying the track and just kind of trying to think and looking at the go-kart, looking at the tires. I'm just like, well, we need to try something big and I'm here to learn. So like, I'm going to do something drastic. And I moved the seat forward like 3.5 centimeters. I mean, like just sent it. I was like, we're going to see if this thing can turn now. Because I remember like the grip comes down and the chassis starts setting down earlier and you get this massive push off the corner and it pulls the engine down. You're like, I can't get off the corner, And with the altitude, everybody's blaming the engine this and engine that and all this stuff. And really, it's
Things is bound up.
The thing's bound up. So we came in and moved the seat forward 3 centimeters. Showed up the next morning. Actually, in morning warm-up, the thing is so loose. I was like, oh, man, I think I messed up. This is not going to be good. And then...
like it's the air.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then we qualified second or third. And... I remember like I led most of the heat race. I'd even won the heat race, maybe got second, had a good race. And then in the main event, I think I led like half the race or something like that. And the car fell off a little bit halfway through. I'm sure I'd overdrove the crap out of the tires. I mean, leading my first S1 Pro Tour race.
Right.
In a package that you didn't think it was possible 24 hours before.
Exactly.
And this is at Breckenridge still? Or
no, Grand Junction.
Breckenridge.
Breckenridge. I don't know why.
That's
because Colorado. I'm thinking of Cameron.
That's pretty good.
Yeah,
So
that's the only
a
place
plug.
that exists there. Actually,
Yeah. So Grand Junction, Colorado.
Grand
I
Junction.
remember the gnarly curbs. I remember pull up some pictures of Fritz and Daniel and some other guys jumping those crazy curbs. I mean, just literally like 4 feet off the ground in a go-kart. That was the first time I was like, okay, I didn't know that was a thing.
Ever since
Driving
then,
here all the time, you're like, no, what do you mean jumping curbs, tic-tac-toe? What is this?
Yeah.
Ever since then, you've just been busting out motor mounts and whatnot.
Yep.
Full circle.
Oh, exactly. So like that was just a huge, light bulb that kind of went off in my head. It was like, okay, maybe like, obviously driving is a lot, but maybe there's like a whole nother world here of, chassis setup and tuning and feeling and like, putting all these little puzzle pieces together. And so over the next couple of years, 2014, 15, just kind of struggled a little bit. Tony Kart, we kept having these problems at these big races. I think 14, like it was awesome fast at all the California Pro Kart races. And at the Pro Tour stuff, we just kept struggling. Like I remember Dallas 2014. Anybody that was there remembers just the gnarly stacks of rubber.
Remember the pictures.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep, just crazy.
In fact, I remember some people saying that they hadn't seen rubber at Cal Speed ever, but they hadn't seen rubber at an event since Dallas.
Yes, exactly.
And
That was like
that was the Pro Kart weekend.
Yeah, that was like the pinnacle of like massive amount of grip in North American karting for probably the last 20 years. And I remember Friday afternoon, like I was throwing everything. So I'd kind of learned, this is basically 1 year after Grand Junction, basically learning.
Friday afternoon, you're already
just wait for it. Anybody that knows Tony Karts right here, we're talking seat about as far forward as it can go, double H axle, low rear ride height, low front ride height, seat struts either off or completely loose. I think like full negative caster. I think I remember grabbing some like negative 4-degree pills or something from Giebler. Basically maxed out, hardest front bar, the gold bar in the front, full front width, like completely maxed out on what you could do to free the car up. It's Friday afternoon, and we go out and run. Everybody puts on new tires for the last session. We're like third, right behind, I think Lennox and a boss. It's like, 2 Euro guys who are freaking hauling butt, and I'm third, and I'm like, wow, that's cool, that's awesome, but like, we're totally screwed. Like, we got 2 more days of this, and I'm out.
So you call Ryan.
100%. Yeah, I remember being on the phone with Ryan, being on the phone with all the Tony Kart guys, Cliff, I remember. And everybody was scratching their heads, all the Tony Kart guys, because these CRG guys were just kicking our butt. Lennox was just, apparently he had some special stuff flown in from Italy.
The field for that weekend, or that time, excuse me, do you kind of remember it was a bunch of Tony Karts and
there was a hand?
I remember a boss. 14. I mean, that's Europe, right? We're talking about the Europeans. This is the short period of time where they were actually coming over here and playing during the Pro Tour.
Yep. Yeah. So PSL was the CRG guys, so they were bringing Lennox over to push their product. Fritz Leesman was also running CRG stuff. He was fast as hell.
Boss is Sodi.
A boss was Sodi, DKC, Mike Jones, those guys are the Sodi importers. So they brought him in. And they had that track pretty figured out, so they had, they knew what they were doing.
Yeah. They've never had grip like that, though.
No, exactly. I remember even a boss was like, dang, there's a lot of grip. Yeah. And even Lennox, I think, because he raced the week before, he had some stuff flown from Italy just for that race, if I remember correctly.
And what's so crazy, just put a point on that, it's never going to be like that in Europe because of the tire package also, and actually the makeup of the tracks as well. Yep. A little bit I know about that. And it's not like that in Vegas. So, like, for the European guys, like, this is never going to happen again,
It used to happen for them, from what I know, in, like, the mid to late 2000s. They had a period of time where they were running, like, ICC engines with super soft tires, and they had gnarly rubber and all this crap.
Like the old Vega whites I heard
exactly.
about,
And then, like, it was in that 2012, 13, 14. I think 14 was the real transition where they went away from the soft tires and more towards that Bridgestone hard tire package. And 14 is kind of that year where you see a lot of transitions in chassis construction.
For the next few years, for sure.
Yes, like a lot of the Tony Karts, Burrell, stuff like that started getting softer and softer to compensate for the harder tire. But like the point of that story was about Dallas, for me, it was like this light bulb. Again, light bulb number 2 now going off is like, okay, chassis, frames. Somebody can fly a frame in over here and be struggling one weekend and absolutely wipe the floor the next weekend. And like everybody else is bound up on 2 wheels, and this guy's freaking cutting through the rubber like a champ. And don't get me wrong, guy is world champion for a reason.
Yeah.
Knows how to drive in rubber, knows how to understand how to tune a go-kart and how to drive around that stuff.
He knew what he was asking for.
Yes, exactly. And so I was like, that's what I need to know. I need to know what he knows, so I know how to tackle this situation next time, if there is a next time. But, to understand why a car works in that condition and understand why, a Tony Kart might work better on Thursday than that car, but that car is going to work better in the main event on Saturday and on Sunday. So I knew at that point, like, okay, there's some stuff, there's a lot of stuff here that goes into this frame geometry and the material. And at that point, we all thought it was materials and stuff like that. And I started learning more about rear bar angles and wheelbases and ride heights and all that fun stuff. And so I believe in 14, struggled at SuperNats that year pretty bad. And Tony Kart, again, was kind of chasing more of that Bridgestone style setup. So for 15, we made the deal with Praga. We met Peter and Blake and all those guys at SuperNats that year. Man, that 2015 Praga was an awesome go-kart for what we were using it for, a really stiff 30 mil. And at the time, I was like, man, this is awesome. This is going to be great. This is what I'm looking for.
And I kind of remember this is right around the time the MRC stuff starts to, like, the Musgrave Racing
starts
team
to really take off.
Starts to really pick up. You know, not under the green and white. It was really after that switch.
So that's a funny point. So like you had said, like in that 2014 year, I mean, that was we had Ocala Grand Prix. I mean, that Pro Tour season, I think I did the numbers once. It was like 70 to 72% of the S1, S2 field was on a Tony Kart or an OTK product.
Wow. Yeah.
That's massive.
Not to mention all the tag carts that they had out there. Yeah.
Halfway through 2015 or by the end of 15, it was less than 10%.
Wow.
So it's not to say that the quality of the OTK product just was bad overnight. Like, oh, they forgot how to make chassis.
Mm-hmm.
It was just that, whether it was the American tire or the American market, or, the shifter kart fields got so big, the tracks we were going to changed. The weather, exactly. We started finding these gnarly track conditions in the Pro Tour. And, a hardcore racer, they're only going to, it's like, hey, man, if this thing ain't working, if I'm getting my butt smoked by that black car every single race. And I think in 2014, Lennox is the only guy in Pro Tour history to sweep every race.
Yeah.
Won everything. Like, it was embarrassing for everybody in America.
It's tough too, because you get, like OTK is now at that point, definitely for sure. It's like, and they've always kind of been, but again, where, like you said earlier, stock, you're going to be quick no matter what, right?
Yep.
But it also comes that point where Tony Kart's the benchmark, everyone else catches up.
Yes.
And whether they progress or not, everyone else figured it out at some point.
Yes, exactly. And whether some chassis companies got lucky and some chassis companies were working hard to make a chassis work over here. Like the reason why we started working with Praga was because they were very interested. They had, a distributor in America, Blake Winkowski and, some other guys. Sean Brazo at the time was helping them out.
Mm-hmm.
Andrick Zine was a part of their program. So it was like, dude, they have this American, basically, task force that wants to make a chassis for America. And that 2015 car was like their first iteration of like, we're going to try to push this car for America. And man, it was good. It was like, geometry. It was basically a Tony kart with a couple modifications, pretty similar to an Intrepid actually. But the material was a lot stiffer. So now this material can cut through that gnarly rubber. So, I remember in Cal Speed, I think 2014, you guys reslurried, or end of 13, middle.
I can't remember. I know
Beginning of
no,
14.
you know what? We did in 12, and it was that was the shit show one.
That was the bad stuff.
I think.
And
No,
then you
12
guys,
might have been okay.
and then you came back and redid it.
I think it was 14.
Yeah.
That was the redo.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
redo.
Yeah, I think
'Cause
so.
I remember there were some LAKC races here at Cal Speed.
It was 12 was
That
when it
were
got all pretty and everything like that,
insane.
but it was slicker and shit. And
Yep.
then we did the redo, and now is when it had the more aggressive with
Yes.
more aggregate
Yes.
grip.
And those
Yeah.
are the days I like. This is again in my learning experience. I'm out here on a LAKC day, and racing against some other Tony Kart guys. I remember Colton Griffin and some other really fast guys. Even Ryan was still racing a little bit. And like, I mean, you'd go out there and set the world on fire. Fast lap 1 of the race, of the main event. Lap 1.
Something's
And your
wrong.
tire pressures are like 7, 8 PSI.
Right.
Lap 1, gnarly. Pulling out to like a 3-4 second lead over the first 5 laps. And losing half a second a lap. Another half a second. Like you're doing 48s at the beginning of the race and you're doing 49 5s, 49 8s, 10 laps into the race. So this is when these light bulbs were going on in the back of my head. Like, man, something is wrong
And this
here.
is on the Praga.
No, this is on the Tony Kart and the 14s.
Gotcha.
This is why, like, all these reasons, like, man,
Okay.
we have all this grip at Cal Speed, all this stuff. We show up at Adams. Oh, the Tony Kart's amazing. You show up at
Yeah.
Willow Springs. Oh, Tony Kart's amazing. It's great. It's blah, blah, blah. Awesome. Button Willow, fantastic. But, like, for our major customer base that is based here at Cal Speed at LAKC and then that Pro Tour, which everybody kind of looks at, we're getting these gnarly grip conditions. We might need something else. And so we did some testing with the Praga stuff. And we're like, holy crap. It's basically a really free, a really loose Tony Kart. A lot stiffer, a lot flatter. Didn't really hike a tire that much. But when the grip comes down, you don't want the chassis to bend that much. So it was good for us. 2015 went great. I think I won my first Pro Tour event in Indiana that year on the Praga.
And you were doing a shifter and tag here, I remember,
Not
at
yet.
LKC.
Not yet.
Oh, gotcha.
So Andrick was doing the tag stuff that year. We were kind of working together. That's when the team, like, everybody saw, like, oh, man, the Pragas are working pretty good with the Honda at LAKC with that soft MG tire. And so everybody was like, man, that thing works really good. And so, I mean, I think we sold almost 150 chassis that year.
Dude.
Was massive.
Wow.
Was gnarly. I mean, it was a fast weekend, and I can't thank Blake and Prague and those guys. I mean, we had that ball rolling, so freaking awesome. So then 2016 comes. We had a pretty good SuperNats. I think ended up 4th that year. Had to come from like 11th on the grid because of drama or whatever. But the car was good.
Real quick, it's kind of interesting too that you end up having that success in S2, right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Just mentally, that's got to be a little bit off. Thinking back on it, right? So out of the gate, you're like, okay, we're
next
just gonna go
following
check
years,
it out,
yeah.
right?
I went.
And you win. You go do S1, and for a variety of different reasons, for variety of different things, you win your first Pro Tour race in 15.
Yep.
I think you just said.
Yeah. It took me 12 actual Pro Tour races before I won my first Pro Tour race.
Man.
So that's, over almost 3 years.
And we haven't even gotten to the SuperNats.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So struggling at SuperNats. I think my first year I got 6th. That second year in 14 was like, I think 10th or 11th. It was bad. Then 15 we switched for Praga for that year. We won in Indiana, and luckily, Praga was spending the time and the money. They had Andrick full force and tag, and then they were sending over Patrick Hayek to run with me on our motor in S1. So now it's me and Patrick basically teeing off against, I want to say one of the, I don't know if he came for all the races, but one of the Europeans came for some of the races. I remember Fritz was really fast that year. A couple other big names, Joey. So it was a pretty stacked field again. And Indiana that year, which luckily was pretty close for Blake's. They had a lot of testing there, and Patrick was able to win on one day, and then I was able to win on the next day. So for the product and the engine and the team and just everything we had going on, it was like, this is a pretty good, pretty good program we got rolling here.
Did you end up snagging another Pro Tour winner like that after that first one? I mean, how are you doing on the Pro Tour?
I won again in 16, thanks to an amazing strategic call by my dad. Literally about 2.5 minutes before we went to the grid for, I think, one of those weird Phoenix weather things where the rain rolls in like out of nowhere.
Wow.
So it had just like rained, thunderstormed for like 10 minutes,
Jesus.
and then the cloud was passing overhead. So everybody on the S1 grid put on rain tires, and I forget where I was starting, like 5th or something like that. And we had rain tires on. We were pushing to the grid, and my dad just like executive decision. And actually no, so I was racing X30 at the time. I remember because me and Jake Craig were pushing the Praga X30 car, and this is when we were doing all that testing, and we're like, man, we got something that's pretty cool. We were really fast, had some really good moments. I think Jake might even podium that weekend. And I was just learning how to drive a tag car. Like I'd 6 years or 8 years into my
your karting.
8 years into my karting career, and I like literally have never driven a tag until just a couple months before then. And so I remember I literally came off the track. I had gotten a penalty for something, I don't know, it was something. So I was arguing with the race director, and I was away forever. And I literally am like, okay, I gotta go. Like my other class is on the grid. Bye. See, I don't care about whatever the call is. And I'm trying to find my go-kart, and I'm like, finally get to the grid, and I'm like, there's like 3 of us with slicks on. And I'm like,
in a sea of rain.
And I'm like, you didn't put the rain tires on? Like, what? Did you not see the track? And when I was like, just shut up, sit in the go-kart and drive. Don't worry about it. Like, just don't crash on the first lap. And of course, I like take off on the first lap and spin out. And I think Danny hit me and bent my wheel or something like that. And I get going again. And it was like,
the bent wheel was part of the tuning your
I
dad
knew it.
expected.
100%, exactly.
Yeah.
And by some miracle, the track just happened to dry out just enough. And I came through the pack and like actually ended up winning the race.
That reminds me of the challenge this year
with Jimenez.
Jimenez, and then even Shimon and your guys' group.
Oh man,
the way things would go certain people's way
Yep.
because you made the right call. It's just
Dude,
those
that's
days.
just that part of racing.
What a memory.
You don't get to see it very often, but when
Yeah.
it happens, you're like, oh my, I can't believe that just worked.
Yeah. Anyway, so you did get that win.
So we got that win. And then that was the year we struggled really hard in Indiana. That was that year where we came back and we're like, man, that was the year. It was like 100 degrees, 105 degrees, 90% humidity. The track was just, literally the greasiest, slipperiest, slimiest thing I've ever driven on. And that was probably the first time I've ever seen a track condition that slimy. So I didn't really understand how to drive it. Didn't really understand how to set the car up for it or what the right kind of car would have been for that.
And that was the Praga.
That was the Praga, the
Right.
2016. And that was kind of when all the stuff was going on right at that race. So that's when we started working with Rob. So we show up at basically 1 year later, Aluminos. 2017, we actually win a Pro Tour race in Sonoma, which was pretty cool. That was massive. That was again against Gary and Jake and AJ and some really fast drivers, Danny. And then were we at Newcastle again? 17 summer? I think so. I think I ended up 2nd or 3rd or something like that. I think Jake ended up smoking everybody that weekend. But anyways, I think we ended up 2nd in Pro Tour that year. So pretty awesome year. I think that was the year Jake won. So we show up at SuperNats that year. Gnarly stacked field. And I remember me and Gary had kind of gotten into it a couple times that year. looking back on it now, I can laugh about it. Like, we were both so intense. You know, me just having left Praga IPK and him driving for them. You know, there was just some tension there for whatever reason. And we had, you know, driven each other hard and aggressive, and there had been some contact. But all things set aside, we just happened to roll into that race. And for qualifying, we set down the exact same lap time and actually tied for pole position. Which, like, if you were writing a script, I don't think you could. That would not be believable. But literally tied for pole position. And so we had some pretty gnarly heat races.
So who got it? No, that's not how that works. Someone had grid 1.
So
someone had grid 2.
Yeah, I think I only did one hot lap or something like that. So the pole went to him lap. Because he had the second fastest lap.
Man. That's crazy.
Yeah. So I mean, it was still like, we were on the front row. I was like, oh shit, like this is pretty good. And I think he was first, and his teammate Iglesias was third. So here I am surrounded by two, you know, Formula K drivers.
Yeah.
You know, I think I was second, and then Matt Hamilton was fourth. So it was like literally the two Formula Ks and the two Aluminos is like just freaking teeing off.
That's awesome.
And then Jake and AJ and Danny, they were all right there. I mean, that top 10 drivers was, I mean, it was a good group of guys. And that track was gnarly. That was that convention center track that was like a minute long. I mean, it was pretty crazy.
I think it was the first year of the convention center. Or second?
Last year. We raced 15, 16, 17. Yeah. Because Danny won the first 2 years on the slippery side of the asphalt, and then the last year we were in the new lot.
Right.
Gotcha.
So 17, we were had some good heat races, ended up winning the main event. Just, I mean, like, barely. I remember Gary had an issue in one of the heat races. So I ended up starting on pole. Iglesias was off pole, and we were like bumper to bumper for the entire race. Like, that was probably the hardest 25 laps I've ever driven in my life.
Do you think back and you're like, he has me beat on this part of the track, or were you guys just that close the whole time?
It was so even. Like, you know, like even this past weekend, I like that situation where you're like, man, he's so much faster in these 3 turns, but I'm so much faster in those 4 turns. I just remember that race being so even.
Wow.
Like, it was just like he could literally delay on my bumper around the entire track.
Dude.
But I was just fast enough to where he couldn't really, you know, make a move.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it, I was actually there. I was watching that race from the sidelines, and you still had that long, which has now become kind of a staple.
That long straightaway into that high-speed 90.
Yeah, SuperNats and whatnot. And I just remember, like, it depended on who was getting onto that deal.
Yes.
And the timing of it. I even remember onboards where the timing of the throttle, like you chill back and then try to get the run.
Yes.
You can actually go to Norberg's onboard in the tag stuff, and he's playing that same game, trying to get the timing right, whether it be in front or behind. In that scenario, in this race, that you end up winning.
Yep.
Do you want to be a leader, or do you want to be second in something that you know is that close?
I do. I don't mind, like, you know, whether it's all the years of motocross stuff and all the karting races, you know, because I had fairly good success. Like, I've won the S1 Pro Kart championship, I think, every year except for 1 year since like 2013. So, like, leading races and winning races and that kind of stuff, I'm very comfortable with, of like being in control and how to control a race. Exactly. And understanding like where to push the car and where not to push the car to make sure that certain mistakes don't happen. And learning from mistakes that I've made in the past. So, and I remember like 16 or 17 laps into the race, I think Iglesias' chain broke, which, thank God. I mean, it gave me like, literally just a little bit of a gap I needed. But then here comes Jake French, number 1 plate that year, and I'm number 2 plate. And like literally he gets to my bumper with like, I think half a lap to go. And I mean, my car, I had set my car up to be fast as hell for like the first 15 laps. Like, I had gone pretty high on pressures, and I had gone like 54.5 inches on the rear end, like really narrow. Actually, Jonathan Tanan had given me some advice right before the race. Because
he's like, widen it out.
No. Opposite. He was actually the one that helped me go a little bit narrow.
Oh,
and,
wow.
Talked me through some stuff. So I'm very thankful to some of the guys that I've been able to kind of have a relationship with and learn little bits and tricks from. Like, Jake caught me right at the end, and we finished 1-2. And then fast forward to 2018 Pro Tour, Had some pretty good success and grew on the podium.
Correct me if I'm wrong. That's 175.
No, still Honda.
19.
Yep,
75
18
right.
still Honda. So we were at NOLA that year. I think I podiumed both days or
That's
something.
a weird year though, because that's where the transition
It
starts
was.
to happen.
It was. So this was the year of me, Jake, AJ. This is the year AJ won the championship. Kyle was pretty quick on that CRG. There's a few other names in there. I think Danny raced a little bit too. And so I think we podiumed in NOLA. I'm trying to remember where the hell the spring nats were that year.
Out of curiosity, as someone who ends up winning SuperNats 17, 18, 19.
That's what I'm getting to.
And these, like, and also early.
Yeah.
Just getting straight to that difference between this one-off event, which obviously you excel at.
Yeah.
You've learned these things. You've been able to play. I mean, the first one, 17, dramatic and tight. But the season-long game seems to be a bit of a thorn in the old Musgrave side. If I can set that up enough for you.
No, 100%.
What's going on with that, my friend? And don't get me wrong, it doesn't look like anybody's really dominated Pro Tour.
Yeah,
not really.
It's been spread
It's always
out.
a shuffle.
Somebody else has always had that something.
Yeah. I mean, Kyle was the first guy last year to win a Pro Tour championship without winning a main event.
Crazy.
Which is crazy. Never happened in the history of a Pro Tour.
It comes down to that consistency.
Exactly. And last year was a pretty crazy year with the introduction of the new engine and, different tracks and stuff like that. And, part of my, let's just say, I think I've gotten second 3 times in the Pro Tour and third once or twice. Like, been there, close.
Yeah.
Newcastle is definitely not my strongest track.
And it's all one
isn't
place
that going to be great
now.
this year? Man, lucky me.
You want to talk about scripts?
Like my driving style, and maybe it's, from kind of growing up and learning my racecraft here at Cal Speed, I really excel at the tighter, twistier, more aggressive kind of tracks.
Get the job done right now type status.
Exactly. The stuff that has, that dry, static grip, which SuperNats is typically pretty loose, but it's in a desert, and there is a little bit of grip, and you drive the corners a certain way. There's a certain apex and diamonding off of the corners that happens that I'm really good at trail braking the car into the center of the turn. Tracks like Newcastle, Phoenix, Utah, these are the very, very opposite of that. It's a lot of
stuff.
High speed, rolling through the corners, off the pedals, stuff that, I tend to overdrive those tracks really bad. That's something that I've been learning, especially in like the last 12 months with the new engine, is how to force yourself to adapt to a different track and a different grip situation to make the most out of the car, make the most out of the track condition. I've definitely placed the blame on myself for a lot of those, Pro Tour mishaps or what could have been. And also, we were always focused, you do so much of your testing, even with Aluminos and Rob, we did so much of our testing here in California for tracks like Cal Speed, Sonoma, et cetera. I mean, we also did something in 2018 that had never been done before. I mean, we went totally undefeated in S1. Every single warm up, fastest lap, every single qualifying pole, every single heat race win, every single main event win.
Wow.
Has never been done ever.
What series?
For Pro Kart Challenge. So here in California, that Aluminos RS1 and Rio chassis, like, unbelievable. We had that thing down to a science. Same thing with Vegas. Like, we show up in Vegas in 18. I mean, that thing was on point.
Mm-hmm.
We had that we had that go-kart built for those situations. And knowing what I know now, I understand why that is. So, you show up at these tracks like Phoenix 2018, I think we did. 110 degrees, 240 drivers or whatever, all this rubber getting laid down, oily as hell, dusty as hell.
Yeah.
Not my
Can you imagine if
strong
Cal
suit.
Speed had that instead of the wet?
Man.
I'd be
nuts.
all for it.
A super grippy track,
Yeah.
but also tight.
Yep. So yeah, no joke. Talk about Pro Tour coming to your hometown, and you're like, man, I think this finally it's coming my way, and then it rains.
Man.
Man, oh man.
Oh,
And dude, she ain't the easiest place to drive in the wet,
Oh
man.
no.
So
no.
if there's-
especially with new motors and all the carburetor
Yeah,
problems.
exactly.
If
It
it's
was the
like-
debut of Cal Speed on the Pro Tour schedule, the engine package, all these different elements, and it was a tale of two different tracks. You had the wet on one day, and pretty much dry
Dry for the most part the
second one.
next
Yeah,
day,
but
yeah.
definitely not high grip.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about that first. I'll come back to it in just a second. Just finish out my little history here of my learning curve. So 2018, really struggling again with the Aluminos stuff on that Pro Tour level of these tracks. Now we're noticing whether it's a little bit of change in the tire compound, just in those weather conditions the tracks are going to. Maybe they're getting older. The way that they grip up is changing. But they're starting to get a lot oilier, a lot greasier as the weekend goes on in these 4-day events. And that was very bad for us. Cars were getting super loose, a little bit too stiff, a little bit too slidey. We need static grip, tight corners. That's what we built our cars for. So, I think I got second or third 2018 Pro Tour. I can't remember, something like that. I think third. And then Pro Tour SuperNats that year, we came in and I think I was me and AJ that year. And I think we won 2 or 3 heat races, put it on pole, won the main event. The car was just on point for that situation.
And you two guys were just static all the way around. You and AJ. Once the gap was there, you guys were dead nuts. The same all the way around. I remember that race.
Exactly. Yeah, that was a good, really good race. So we roll into 19. I've got all this info in my background now. Pro Tour here at Cal Speed. Gotta love it. We're fast on Friday.
Beautiful day Friday.
Because we're like,
beautiful.
This is our hometown. So
actually got fairly grippy by the end of the day.
It did. There was rubber laid down, little berms. Ooh, I was so excited. And I want to say I was fastest, and then Prescott Campbell was second. Which I was super proud of. Man, that kid was really, really starting to lay it down last year. And of course it rained, and that was that. I probably raced in the rain less times than I could count on my hand.
Dude, you know what? For where you're at before your incident happened, I was stoked to see you up there, man. And I'm sure you're like, holy shit.
Then a wet/drying track. This guy decides to put it in the wall on a track that he's driven more laps at than everybody else combined.
Man.
So,
that was a heartbreaker.
Yeah.
Parked over there in turn number 5.
And then it was I don't know, a few laps later, a race does the same thing.
Yep, exactly.
Like, leading
corner.
Pro 2, and he just puts it in the fence.
Yep.
Well, and shit, he was actually leading the whole thing.
I know.
He was
right.
overall.
Good point.
Yeah, he was racing Andrew for the lead there.
Yeah.
So again, learning, go through the rest of the year, new engine package, all that fun stuff. Starting to figure out, this Aluminos chassis that we had, that really Rob had built, from the ground up for the Honda. Dude, now we just bolted on 8 more horsepower and 10 more pounds. We could make it work here when there was grip, but these other conditions, we showed up at Utah that year. I think one of the days, I did put it on pole and was leading one of the races. And I was just having to drive it so far above my limit. I'm at 110%.
Yeah.
And I had issues with brakes or whatnot and freaking sent it off the track while leading. So now we're at 2 strikes for Billy here on the Pro Tour. Go me. And just struggling. So then there were some issues going on with CRG too. So there were some supply issues, and anybody that knows what's going on with CRG right now kind of understands. There was rumors and stuff like that, and long story short, we ended up doing some other deals just to try, because a few years earlier we were selling 150 chassis, almost. And so now here we are, barely able to get 20 to 30 a year. And it's, hurting us, just because that ball had kind of stopped rolling. And
I actually remember hearing something about that going into SuperNats the year you won.
We were
trying to get stuff taken care of.
So, I mean, nothing against Rob. I have no qualms about it. But, the chassis we won 2017 on, that was 10 months old. And then the chassis going into 2018, that RS1, that was 8 months old. I had raced 2 Pro Tour races on that, all the Pro Kart races, Lancaster, a bunch of LAKC. And showed up at SuperNats and won. So I don't mind those stories because it proves that if you have your stuff set up right, you don't need brand new equipment. You know what I mean? All these guys
it's not a prerequisite. Yeah.
No, it's man, if you built the car right, if you build it to last, you can make it fast, just as fast as it is 8 months down the road as it was when it was brand new. So I really like that, and I really respect, what Rob and Gian and even the CRG guys have done with their equipment to be able to make it that kind of fast, where you hear the other stories from, whether it's Tony Kart or, some of the other softer cars out there that like, oh, it's brand new. And if it's not, if you have more than 2 races on it, you better throw it away or get rid of it.
I hate that shit, man.
Which sucks. Exactly. It's not consumer friendly. So I've always kind of, since then kind of strayed more towards the stiffer chassis, just so the customer can hold on to a chassis for a year or 2 and still be competitive. Because I think that's, way more feasible, way more realistic.
Especially in the shifter category. I mean,
exactly. Yeah, because the shifters have a pretty steep barrier to entry, but once you own the go-kart, you're really, the rebuilds are pretty far and few between because we have so much more horsepower. We're not, stretching them out so bad everywhere. And, you're really just spending the money on tires and track days and stuff like that. Like, if the equipment will last, you don't have to put that much money back into it. It's not like you're having to rebuild the entire motor every 2 hours. Not at all.
Right.
So it's a good, kind of a good program.
All right, so we all know how 2019 ends for you. But I would to put a point on basically your career up to this point, it does end up in a win. And actually, Derek and I were at SuperNats. I actually got a chance to race SuperNats for my first time, and it's different being on that side of the fence for sure as a competitor. But speaking of fences, him and I and a few of our friends, people who were hanging out, my race is already done and dusted. I think yours is the last one.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we're outside the fence, and we can see basically right where pit in is. I think it's like turn 5 or something like that. Yeah. So you end up winning. This ends up being your 4th win.
Yep.
3rd one in a row in either
pro shifter.
Pro shifter category, whether it be S1 or otherwise. But that puts you in a fairly illustrious club, which earlier that day, Kip Foster had just joined with 4 wins.
That son of a bitch.
What does... we could tell everybody who was at the sharp end there was super happy for you. What is... And you didn't have to race too hard for this one. The race went your way. You were out front and you have it. Barring stupid shit happening, right?
Yeah.
What are the thoughts? You got about 5 to go, 4 to go, 3 to go. 2 to go. When the sticks come up, how's the brain going?
Let's actually back that up. You've already having won SuperNats quite a few times, and going into you're on the grid.
So what's funny is real
final.
Quick. It's like 2017 happens, and I win that SuperNats. I'm like, okay, like I think I kind of got this SuperNats thing figured out. Kind of know how the cars need to be set up and how I need to drive and do my job. And like I'd kind of played around with like, okay, so now I have 2 wins, which like not a lot of people have 2 wins. And I'm like, I'm gonna go for 4. Like I think I want 4 in my career. Like I want to get what Connor DeFilippi has. Like everybody talks like,
and that was the guy.
He was a legend. He was one of the GOATs, greatest of all times in a go-kart. Guy could do unspeakable things.
Not quite as good as Cameron Jocelyn, however, and was it
an
80cc shifter or something like that.
Oh, right, yeah.
Anyways,
Cameron shortly retired after that.
Smart move. But I mean, so I always had this thought in my head, and like I would joke around with people and say like, I want to go for 4 wins. Like I want to go for 4. I want to be the best. I want to be that guy that has that record. I want to have the most pro or SuperNats wins of all time, and I want that to stand. That'll be my legacy. So 18 comes and goes, and we get number 3, 2 in a row, which, at that point to win SuperNats back to back is like, almost unheard of. Danny was like, I think the first to do it in pro shifter, I think maybe except for Artigo or something like that a few years, 10 years earlier. So Danny did it 15 and 16. Then I did it 17 and 18. It's pretty cool to be a part of that 3-win club. And so really going into this year, the confidence, the way the year had went, we were on some good equipment. And I was driving at the top of my game. And it was coming in basically me, Jake, and AJ. We knew we were going to be the 3 guys. Rory Vanderster threw his name in with his new go-kart. Man, he was absolutely flying on that thing, on the new Magic Kart. And so I have this weird thing with SuperNats. Like, when I'm actually racing and on the track, it is probably the most focused I ever am out of the entire year. There's just something about the race and the event and the pressure and the drama, that just kind of turns my head on in a different way. growing up with the motocross stuff, my dad always used to tell me, like, he always used to use Jeremy McGrath as like this perfect example of this guy who could literally be on the starting line before his Supercross main event and have a camera in his face and doing a friendly, funny interview, talking about his bike or his personal life and stuff like that with this camera guy, literally like with his helmet on and, just talking, shooting the shit. And within 60 seconds, strap the helmet on, put his gloves on, put the goggles on, 30-second board goes up. And I mean, it's literally the flip of a switch. And this guy is on kill mode. And he doesn't remember what he was talking about 10 seconds before. All that matters is the gate, the dirt, the bike, and what his job is. So like that level of focus, that attention to detail is something I've always strived for. And there's something about SuperNats and, like I said, just that ambiance or that, high stakes atmosphere that just kind of puts me in that zone. So no matter what's going on in the pits or whatever else, it's like, man, when that visor goes down and we go on the grid or we go on the track, like it is game time. And so what's funny is I remember in 17, those 25 laps, I didn't even know Iglesias' chain had popped off. I thought he was on my bumper the whole damn race.
Right.
I had no clue.
No time to turn around.
So then when Jake shows up, you think it's Iglesias still.
Literally never turned around. Didn't know it was Jake behind me until after the checkered flag. 18 comes and goes. Looking back on it, I had that, second lead on AJ the whole race. I thought he was on my bumper the entire goddamn race. I was driving that was 25 perfect laps. Never put the wheel wrong. That pressure of him being right on my bumper, like I just knew it had to be all or nothing. 2019 comes, and I knew we had the speed. We definitely had a little bit of an advantage. We definitely had more time in the bag compared to some of the years prior. Part of that was Jake. Jake was at the top of his game, but he was with a new team, new car, all that stuff. So there's a learning curve there. And in that same race, I think I had a couple second gap or whatever by the end. I had no clue. I was literally helmet down, everything I had for 25 laps. So like you said, 5 laps to the end, I'm really not thinking about anything other than just driving the go-kart. It's funny the way that the sound of the exhaust or whatever bounces off the barriers and the walls. It just sounds like there's somebody behind you all the time.
Right. Oh, that is actually a thing.
And I don't know if it's that just pushes me, but, I literally drove all 25 laps. And like, what was funny with the 175s this year, and, part of it's maybe set up and us not, everybody's still learning the motors a little bit. But man, did our stuff fall off. Like everybody's car I knew, because, we were doing I forget what it was, 45-1 or something like that was fast lap. And by the end of by the middle of the race, you're doing 45.5s, 45.6s. By the end of the race, you're from 8s and 9s and O's, and you're like, man, my stuff's falling off. I'm hanging on for dear life here. I hope this guy, because in a normal condition, when your cart starts falling off like that, you're in trouble.
You're not losing a second.
Exactly. You're like, oh God, this is bad. This is give me flashbacks to that 2014 Tony Kart days. So I'm thinking the guy's going to show up any corner.
Do you go defensive on the final lap, or did you actually take
I think
gander?
this was the first race ever where I think with 2 to go, luckily coming out of turn 2 at SuperNats, it's so tight. I actually was I kind of glanced over my shoulder and I'm like, oh my God, I actually have a lead. Okay, cool. So then I kind of chilled, made sure, because the car was getting so loose the last couple laps.
Just make it around.
Oh my God. I mean, we had burned those tires to the ground, getting everything out of them. So then I just kind of chilled, made sure I hit my marks and that kind of stuff. And that was the first time I actually looked back and relaxed like that. But yeah, I mean, it's when you're at that pace, usually when you feel your car falling off like that, you're like, man, I'm in trouble. But luckily for me this year, everybody's cars kind of fell off like that. We were all overdriving the crap out of our tires. So nobody really had that, last 5 laps super mega charge. Everybody was kind of falling off at the same rate. And that's something I've actually been working on a little bit this year, to anticipate that, going into this next year. I'm already thinking of the things that went wrong last year, the problems we had, whether it was chassis setup, engine stuff, this and that. It's even though we won, there's things we could have fixed. There's things we could have done better. There's
try to improve.
There was time to be gained. Exactly.
So obviously winning 4 is a big deal to you. You want to kind of stand alone and be
Yep.
the 5.
Yep.
And obviously, I mean, to be honest with you, Kip Foster's going to be right there as
Son of a-
always.
Mike Smith, we need to get you up there this year, okay?
Oh man,
Fully sponsored ride from the Musgrave.
There we go.
I'll tell you right now, I think Matt Johnson's going to be your best bet or something like that. But so obviously winning 4 is a big deal to you. Now, as you make this transition, as here we are in 2020, crazy year the way things have gone so far. There's no winter nats, there's no spring nats. It's just I think it's the summer shootout, summer nat shootout or something like that they're calling it. And you're talking 2 weekends, 3 rounds per weekend. It's all for one, and it's on a track you absolutely love.
My favorite.
But
Let me say, it is like one of the funnest tracks in the country to drive. It's just like the way the track grips up and
did the new
behaves.
configuration change anything
doesn't
for you?
click too much.
Oh, I love the configuration.
So you like
last
the
year.
new play?
That was my favorite
okay.
part. Yeah, give me the bowl turn and the supercross jump, and I feel at home.
So, but to add to that, we can say that now you're going to be on your homemade in shop. It's the Musgrave package.
Yes.
So it's not just Billy Musgrave trying to win for Billy or any of the sponsors. It's maybe adding to the livelihood.
No, exactly. Like this is going to be a pretty big deal. I've been keeping everything pretty quiet just because it's so much testing. I mean, we're pretty fortunate that the first set of tubes we got bent up. I mean, I did my homework, learned a lot about metal, had a lot of help from some super good friends and some people that are helping us out. Getting metal tested, getting a lot of the Italian stuff tested, figuring out what it really is and what it really isn't. And just learning, taking all the years that I've spent, the last 7, 8, 9, 10 years of experience, and putting that into what I know I need as a driver. So, there's Billy Musgrave, the go-kart driver, and then there's Billy, the engineer or the chassis tuner, the guy that really, I try to get my head around the chassis and what it's doing. And, a little tangent, like I've always been, ever since like my first Pro Tour race, that 2013 event, I never wanted to be coming off the track and saying, to my tuner or my mechanic, which I really never, I had some guys that helped us out, but I never really had like a full factory tuner or mechanic. So I always put that pressure on myself to come off the track and not come off and, say, oh, the go-kart's sliding or the go-kart's pushing or the go-kart sucks, make it better. It's like, no, I need to have way more responsibility than that. I need to be able to come off the track and say, I'm having a slight oversteer on corner entry, so we just need to lower the back of the go-kart, move the seat back a little bit, maybe drop the tire pressures, put some different hubs, change the axle. Like, I want those answers before I even hit the scales. I want to be able to understand the go-kart so well that I already know the 2 or 3 things or the one thing I'm going to change for the next session. And that's really helped push me. So, I can fine tune the cars so much better now. Whether it's at SuperNats or now some of the Pro Tour stuff.
Putting that in a perspective, you're going into the Pro Tour, which is, it's not much of a tour, but it is the national championship.
Yep.
And one, obviously, that's SuperNats is something that you've found success at, and you've had a bit of a carrot there with that deal.
Yep.
But this Pro Tour has got to be something that obviously you want to have that number one plate, etc.
Yeah.
Is the new chassis thing putting even more pressure on this, or are you starting to take the driver hat off a little bit and go, this is a development program, and
Yes, actually. Going into this race, I'm actually not putting too much pressure on myself. I know it's kind of a big deal just because all 6 rounds are at one event. But I'm not too worried about it. If we show up and the go-kart totally sucks, that's okay, because I know what I'm going to need to fix now.
You're accepting that there's so many more variables right now.
Exactly. Like where we're at right now, I mean, hell, I haven't even gotten to drive the thing here at CalSpeed.
Right.
I mean, like literally, we guys just opened a couple of weeks ago, and I've been, still bending and fixing some stuff on the car. So
very young program.
Oh my God. Like literally 8 weeks of on-track testing max.
Man.
So to be able to put it on track now, luckily 2 little pro kart races, Willow Springs and Santa Maria this weekend. Be able to try it with 2, 175 and a KZ. So I know the thing's fast. There's a couple issues I have with it, like we were talking earlier, about brakes. Still trying to figure that out. And then, just a little bit on chassis setup, chassis design. I have some new ideas. And also learning so much about, there's some of the big things that you think about the go-kart that are so important that comes to find out really aren't too critical. And then there's other little pieces of the go-kart that you wouldn't pay much attention to that are actually massively important. So it's taking some of these smaller aspects and trying to refine them, and not just make them, the best performance, but also make them maybe a little bit easier to work on, longer longevity, make the chassis last longer, make sure it doesn't crack, all these other little kind of quality of life things that I think go-karts are in dire need of.
So you've got this upcoming event that's obviously, as far as the national scale goes, is about as big as it's going to get besides SuperNats and any of the SuperNats. These two marquee big-ass events on the calendar here, basically for the debut of a chassis that's extremely young, still going through some growing pains and some teething problems, etc. So hopefully you have those as much dialed in as possible, with, I assume, not exactly a slew of extra parts hanging out with you,
Right.
and stuff like that.
No, exactly. So, yeah, for like the parts and stuff, we're trying to actually make as much of the stuff as we can in-house.
And is it just you driving this thing right now? There's nobody else on the chassis. And at these events, or at least for the Pro Tour, it's going to be
for right now,
only.
it's just me. Like I said, I'm taking a step back from the massive race team stuff just so I can focus more, so I'm not so distracted. So yeah, I think I'll put Vicente on one of these cars. I'm hoping to have some more built by the next LAKC. Well, hopefully by this comes out, I'll have had one built for him. And yeah, so I mean, the plan will definitely be to get some other drivers' feedback, because like we were talking earlier, I think I'm I do a pretty good job of like getting a baseline setup that's easy to drive for a majority of drivers. But again, that's only me. So maybe other people have slightly different driving styles, and what works perfect for me might not necessarily work perfect for somebody else. So I got to make sure I have enough adjustability in the chassis to where you can make it fit your driving style and still be able to put out, the right kind of lap time.
Well, and someone like yourself too, it's making sure that the car is drivable with that, but now that you're making sure you're not masking any issue by adapting and being blind to that,
Exactly.
So,
Yep, exactly. So I need some of that outside unbiased feedback to really tell me, get those race day complaints where the driver says, this thing's horrible. It sucks. Fix it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can't have a situation where you're adapting too far with it, because you have to be, you can't take your driver hat off, more put on a test driver hat, because there's a big damn difference between test driving and going racing with it, because you got to win. So you guys are basically, you got a different program here in 2020. The Billy Musgrave driving career, well, not necessarily on pause. The focus is now more on the business side, and a complete 180, if you will, from a year ago, where it was race team, you go and race, and also the kinds of stuff, and catering to all the different people under the tent. I know you kind of talked about in the very beginning, like the thought process with the chassis and stuff like that, but what really was the why? Why do you? Because you could do something different with a different chassis, or maybe not even be a team if you didn't want to, and just be a kart shop. Why decide to get into the chassis development game and the chassis brand game? And maybe you can kind of shed some light on why there's several others that are doing the same thing.
Actually, yeah, this is a very good topic. The simple answer is just because it's time. There's a couple other American kart manufacturers. Probably Margay is the most successful. John Martin with the iKart does a great job. It's actually a really good chassis. But they're, John's a busy guy, and I don't think he can put the focus, to really expand, to fix some of the other things that the kart manufacturers don't do a good job of. He makes an awesome product though. Same thing with Margay. They do an awesome job with the four-stroke stuff. They really push that, have a huge following, and can really show you that, hey, we can build a go-kart in America if we test and understand what we're building it for. It's not like the stuff coming from Europe is some magical metal that nobody gets except for, these guys in some special, mythical metal factory.
Some cave.
Yeah, trust me, it doesn't work like that. And that was especially eye-opening, like when we literally welded our first set of tubes together, and there's even some issues with that first set of tubes that we realized after the fact, like, oh, we messed up a couple things, and it still puts out these kind of lap times and still is outright fast and feels good to drive, and back to back with other chassis is fast, and it has its problems, but Nothing that I don't think I can fix. But long story short, like, let's take a step back from the people racing the chassis and the people driving the chassis and stuff like that. Let's take a real big step back to the overall industry and the state of the sport. Here we are in 2020, and karting, I wouldn't say it's any bigger than it was 10 years ago, and I wouldn't say it's any bigger than it was 20 years ago. Karting's always just kind of been this static, small playground that most people used to leapfrog into other sports, or into car racing or IndyCar or NASCAR or stuff like that. And it's never had room to breathe on its own. And, a lot of that is the way that because we're held to the customs of the Italian importers and the way they do business and the margins they do, and the advertising or lack thereof that they do to the general population. Like if you look at Tony Kart and CRG and, all these big teams in Europe, their business model is to only sell X amount of chassis, go after, certain teams and drivers and run a profitable race team and, build their market to develop the new F3, F2, F1 drivers and have the Max Verstappens and the Charles Leclercs and those kind of the people come through their program. That's what they do it for. Like they're race teams, they're race companies. They're not they're never going to be like a Honda or a Yamaha of go-karts, unfortunately. And they've done a very good job at figuring out and maximizing the performances of the chassis for what they're using. Like I said before, there's no doubt that the quality of a Tony Kart or a CRG or a Burrell is phenomenal. The material, the components, all that stuff is great. It's just, as a company on a larger perspective, they're not doing anything to grow the sport. They're not doing anything. Tony Kart sells 5,000 chassis a year, and they're not doing anything to sell 5,001. They sell 5,000, and they're happy with that. Right now Burrell Art is making a pretty big push to expand their market, but they're expanding their market share, by taking business away from other kart companies. They're saturating the existing kart market. I don't see, being in the sport now for 10 or 12 years, I have not seen a single example of a chassis manufacturer going outside the industry to try to do a better job of expanding this sport to the general population. I've never once seen an example of what Honda, Yamaha, KTM, Suzuki, Kawasaki, what all these companies do for motocross or for ATVs, UTVs, jet skis, and all these other power sport industries. None of the karting companies take on any of that responsibility. They unfortunately expect their dealers, their normal mom and pop dealers out of their, small shop or whatever, to take on the brunt of advertising. Like, it's a privilege to buy their chassis, and now it's your responsibility to go market it and tell people in your area about go-karting. It's completely backwards. Like, it's not, Malcolm Smith Motorsports or Chaparral's responsibility to go tell people about motocross and how great it is. They're a motorcycle dealer. Everybody knows that they want to buy a Honda because Honda has done their marketing and they've done their branding, and people know they want to buy a CRF 450, so they go to Chaparral. Chaparral advertises Chaparral.
Yeah.
Langston advertises Langston.
They have their own business to promote.
They don't advertise motocross. It's not their responsibility to advertise and push motocross. That's on the manufacturer. And unfortunately, no one in karting, no manufacturer has taken that responsibility upon themselves. They only push karting to the racers. So, you take a motorcycle or a jet ski or whatever, and you're lucky, let's say out of all 100% sales around the country, around the world, you would be lucky if 5% of those sales go to people who race that product competitively. Like out of a normal motorcycle, you were lucky if 5% of the people that go and buy a 125 or 250 or 450 are actually going to go race that, whether it's at a club level or competitive level. 95% of their sales are to recreational power sports users. Guys that just want to drive the product, ride the product, have some fun with their buddies, take it out a couple times. They sell thousands and thousands and thousands of vehicles a year to people like that, where karting is the exact opposite. The vast majority of people who buy karts or get into karting do so to go racing, or do so to use it as a leapfrog into another platform, or use it as a temporary test bed to sharpen their skill set for whatever else they're doing. Nobody inside the industry, again, from a manufacturer's perspective, tries to set this sport up as its own end goal and set it up as its own end destination. So, yeah, I have some pretty big plans for the sport. I see no reason why it can't be, maybe not as broadly appealing as Supercross, but if it was a tenth of that, it would be 100 times bigger than what it is right now. And that would only help everybody inside the sport. Like, I don't have any intention of putting any of the Italian companies out of business. I think they do a great job. But I think I need the leverage and the capabilities and the position to be able to support a dealer network and a distribution network of products, and to do a better job of explaining the sport and of taking that step back, from the retail side and pushing this sport to the general population as a whole, to expanding the sport into the power sports industry, to show people how awesome and how freaking cool karting can be.
It sounds like you're getting into the karting manufacturing game for a hell of a lot more than karting manufacturing.
Yeah.
It is.
You're trying to actually, it sounds like, do a hell of a lot more than just build chassis and put all that other kind of stuff out there. But and I suppose that it could be argued you could do all that without being a chassis manufacturer. However,
But you can't.
So
again,
without getting into the debate, because
but I have no problem telling it right now. I mean, it's so Tony Kart can make 5,000 chassis a year. Let's say I wanted to go sell 300 next year. I can't get them. Let's go say I wanted to sell, if I could have gotten 100 Aluminoses, during a couple of those years there, like, I could have sold every one. And it wasn't, to be able to have that pipeline, and then, to be able to ask a dealer that's, it's a time issue, of course, not having the time to deal with all of these retail customers, and then also have the time to go push all these other goals that we have. But then also the margin on the products. So to be able to ask a dealer to survive on 25% on a go-kart, and then have them pay shipping, have them pay for the box and the pallet, and their guy to box it up and ship it to you. I mean, you're lucky if your local dealer's making 18 to 20% on a chassis. And then most of the time they're building it for the customer for free, just to help get the customer on track.
Right.
So it's like, you see all these shops and race teams come and go so often in karting. And it's not for a lack of effort on the go-kart, on the shops team. I mean, on the shops side. I mean, you see these guys working their damn butt off trying to make ends meet. And it's just that the structure and the system in place hasn't been set up to make these guys successful. So, it's karting is small. So these guys are scrapping tooth and nail to find every customer that they can. And again, so much of the marketing burden is placed on our dealers. I mean, it's just unfair to ask your normal dealer that's busy just trying to sell retail karts to ask them to go do all the marketing to try to brand karting. I mean, it's just not right.
Now it's going to obviously be a lot a heavier deal, right? Because as the manufacturer, you're going to be doing all the
Yep.
advertising, etc. as well.
Yep.
So you got a hell of a year here. You're going to do obviously this full 180.
Yep.
I joked earlier about does your age have anything to do with stuff getting older?
I still got a couple of years till I'm master.
Well,
yeah,
exactly. Unfortunately for everybody else, one of the things though, and you'll end up being like Ron Whiter anyway, but running S1 for forever because you're that good. But where I'm going with that is we ask a lot of the drivers, was there a time, especially ones that are in the industry working, they're not doing as much of the racing and stuff like that. Is this, like, again, I asked, the age and whatnot, but is this driven by you getting a little bit older and
for sure
wanting to do kind of just the Billy game? And obviously I know you and Chandler are eventually going to have some kind of future, right? I mean, is it one of those things you're like, hey, I got to figure some shit out here?
For sure it's that. And also, 2 or 3 years ago, I wouldn't have been ready. I wouldn't have known everything I needed to know about the chassis.
And you didn't have enough SuperNats wins.
Yeah,
yet.
exactly. Not quite. Still don't. But no, I didn't know. You hear all the stories. Everybody hears all the stories about how, special certain chassis materials are, and like how only these guys can get it, and how, no American chassis has ever really been successful in a shifter kart market on a grand scale. And
I don't think everybody's hearing those stories, Billy. I think you're hearing the stories specifically because you're in that that genre.
Exactly. But I mean, name you have Margay, who's super successful in the 4-cycle stuff, but name another American go-kart that's really won on a massive national scale. You know, it really hasn't happened, at least not for the last 20 years.
Track Magica was probably
Track
the last.
Magic was
big,
definitely the closest.
Big time.
Yes. They had moments of brilliance. They had their issues, but they had moments. And it's unfortunate that it went the way that it did. But I think it's awesome to see Gary doing what he's doing, especially with his own line of product. You know, even if it is made in Italy, I can definitely appreciate that he's branding it himself, bringing back that Track Magic name. I think it does a lot for the American market and just the general attitude of the American populace. So that's why I appreciate and I encourage what Rory and Andrew and AJ are doing with their Magic Kart, what Race is doing with the Race Factory. Even if he's trying to riff off my name real quick, but that's all good. That's all good.
The timing.
We're gonna send that directly to him. Just that clip.
But it's all good. I mean, I think it's good for the American, karting market. Again, this is in the grand scheme of things pretty small scale, but for the racers to see that, hey, we actually know what we're doing. Like we actually.
Well, I think the neat part too is you guys are all so young taking this on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I suppose if you're a European going racing or whatever, I mean, certainly there's one level, and at the national level, certainly I suppose there's some national pride as far as the equipment and who you're racing, etc. On the local level, I honestly don't think anybody really cares.
No.
And not only,
but they just get told what the local shops will tell them, which is like, oh, you can't, race this. You got to be on a Tony kart. Or like, oh, you can't race that. You have to be on a CRG.
Okay, out of the gate, certainly. But then you got people who are a little more versed in the game. They're still going to have the same thought process. As long as you get in seat and you can do what you want to do.
Yes.
Yeah, the package is good.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's it's just all the pieces of the puzzle are lining up, and it's just time. Like I know enough now where I'm confident. Like I can come off the track and I know exactly what I need out of that go-kart. And maybe I can't get it all the time. Like we said, maybe we're just outside the window on the go-kart, but at least I know what direction to take and I know what needs to be done. And as I learn more and more about the actual metal in the chassis, the way things are welded together, the, geometry part of how the tubes are bent and how they're put together, now I can really start perfecting this, that part of the puzzle where I can have a go-kart that is made entirely for a 175 on an Avinco tire for American go-kart tracks. And I can make something down the road that's made for an X30 on an Avinco tire for American go-kart tracks, or for a 206, or for, I can niche market these go-karts that are made exactly for what they need to be made for, which, it is definitely a limiting factor of the karting market that, unfortunately we don't have springs and shocks that can be adjusted. So instead, our frame is our spring. So it's not like you can just buy a motorcycle off the showroom floor and be like, yeah, I weigh 220. So I need to put this, spring rate and redo the forks and I'm going to be set. It's like, well, no, you're 220. Like I can't really, you can race the same thing as somebody who's 140, but, the setup's going to be wildly different. So, maybe if I can offer something that, down the road, I can get that set up to where it'll work for both drivers, whether that's different seats or, slightly different construction of the tubes. I can offer something that everybody will feel is perfectly made for them here.
Are we going to start seeing maybe a beginning of a full circle here where you go back to Billy Musgrave, the test driver, and put the racing to the back seat a little bit? Are we going to see you at Pro Tour SuperNats without the helmet on?
Ooh, that might be a long time.
A little tough.
I'm definitely going for a Pro Tour championship one way or another.
So, do you think you got some consecutive years left, though?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
now that you're not physically capable of, but just in terms of what you want to try to achieve,
Yeah, no, and that's one thing I can be super appreciative of in karting is, like, unlike motocross where, dude, you turn 30 and you're getting pretty old. You know what I mean? Your body just can't keep up with that kind of physical abuse. Luckily, karting is relatively safe and relatively, not so physically demanding.
Forgiving, yeah.
Exactly. So, we've seen Ron White at 40-some years old, even Darren Elliott at 50 years old, run at the front of an S1 field. Mm-hmm. Even guys like Nick LeDuc just recently, winning Streets of Lancaster, winning Pro Tour races well into his 30s. So, that kind of stuff is really cool.
John Crow.
Yeah, dude, there you go.
Exactly.
Oh, man.
50-some years old. Still throwing down.
3 classes a day, name it.
Exactly. So that's, it. I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. I'm just not that kind of guy. I think, whether I'm racing locally or nationally or just testing, I mean, driving and racing, that's just a part of who I am.
We're always going to see you with a helmet on then.
Pretty much, yeah.
So we're gonna. You said the race team stuff's kind of taking a back seat to this kind of thing. Oh, are we still gonna see the MRC trailer on a regular, or is it with just a couple of guys, or is it like?
Yeah. So I'm just gonna scale it back. So, last weekend at Santa Maria, which I mean everything's still just barely getting going, but I just had like 4 or 5 drivers under the tent. Real mellow, just nice and easy. More guys that are a little bit more self-sufficient. I think for some of the LAKC stuff, I'll use that as kind of the more test bed for the newer guys, the guys that want to come and learn. And I still have the patience to help teach everybody. Try to get a little bit better at just, providing maybe some videos or some stuff to kind of help get that information out. Just the simple things like tire pressures and, making small chassis setups or understanding how a go-kart works are a little bit more accessible. But yeah, so like some of the larger races for the pro karts, the pro tours, the SuperNats, that I'm going to be taking a little bit more seriously. Because, for sure over the last couple of years, there's been plenty of races where, the lack of attention to my own equipment has resulted in, inadequate results.
Because you're so busy with the team.
Yeah, exactly. Whether changes aren't getting made, because we ran out of time, or just mentally, I'm, worrying about 14 other guys under the tent.
Right.
You think that maybe that's why you do a little bit better at SuperNats? Because
I think
it's basically your show.
And it's for sure. When I come into SuperNats, I mean, even if I do have 18 guys under the tent, I'm fortunate enough to be able to hire a couple key people to help run the team. And, if they want my data, the data's there. I got a data guy that can grab it. I'll answer questions for them. But like, I'm there to race. And it's, when I'm in my sessions, I'm in my sessions, and like, I'm doing my own thing. So yeah, I mean, you can definitely feel a difference. I can definitely tell a difference, in my own performance.
You got one thing do you want, besides the SuperNats and besides the Pro Tour? You got something on the outside of that's all these different years of karting and motocross and all this other kinds of shit you've done. You got one thing that you go, that was badass. Like that one moment, that one achievement, whether it be a championship, a race win, or just a memory. You got one thing that kind of stands out at you?
I mean, probably the most emotional was probably 2017 SuperNats. I mean, coming off of 5 years of really, barely scraping together like 2 Pro Tour wins, and like not really ever being on the podium at SuperNats, and then to be able to come in. I feel like since that race, I've kind of been at the top of my game. I learned a lot that year. And again, it's just all that extra seat time. I mean, not to say that I wasn't fast, 2013, 14, 15, 16, but being fast is only half of it. So as I get older, I almost feel like I'm getting better and better in certain aspects. Really understanding the equipment, really understanding how to take care of tires, and being able to maximize everything about the kart, and understanding everything about what's going on with my racecraft and what's going on with the other drivers on the track. Like a singular moment, I mean, I just look back on, like, it's been such a journey. It's been such a crazy, wild ride. I mean, I never would have thought in 2010, 2011, like, I would be racing go-karts or running a go-kart team or doing anything that I'm doing right now. I mean, I would have never even imagined everything that's happened. And it has just been one of the coolest, funnest, definitely a lot of work, a lot of late nights. I mean, more than I can even explain. Not really taking home paychecks and stuff like that. Just kind of putting everything back in, trying to learn and trying to expand and grow, and grow as a person and grow as a driver and a tuner and a mechanic. And I think it's just been like, laying down the foundation for what's to come. You know what I mean? I feel like we've been putting in all this work and all this time and effort, and now it's time to kind of grab the next gear and go full speed ahead.
Right. Is there besides the SuperNats and Pro Tour, getting more of those wins and getting your Pro Tour championship hopefully soon, is there anything outside of the U.S. you think you want to try to achieve as far as driving, or do you think it's...
Yeah, I mean, long term, I am getting a little bit old, but I would love maybe in the next, I'd probably say in the next 2 to 3 years, if everything's going pretty well with the chassis thing, I would actually really enjoy going over to Europe, maybe for a couple months, just to go throw down in their backyard and just kind of prove that point. So, let's say hypothetically in a few years' time, we got our ball rolling pretty strong over here, and being able to have that opportunity to just kind of go throw down and show them what we can do would be pretty cool. And also on the flip side, I think there's also an argument to be made for putting maybe a little bit more focus over here. That maybe the focus for karting doesn't have to be in Italy.
Right.
Let's just say, what's to stop us from making the pinnacle of karting here in America?
They want to come over here and throw down against you. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think if we start asking the right questions and start bringing the right focus, and we start as a country and as a community of kart racers, instead of looking to Europe as always being the pinnacle, why don't we bring that over here? Why don't we make American karting what the rest of the world wants to come have a chance at participating in?
I think it's cool, man. You've had a journey of up and downs, and it's not over. You're developing a chassis in the, early stages. You've already had the ups and downs, but you got a lot of years left, whether it's driving or not, but you got a lot of years left in the industry. But it's so cool how you mentioned earlier how it's you and Ray's, Bedozo and AJ, all these guys working together, kind of sharing notes, if you will.
Yep.
And whether it be a different color scheme on the kart, it's all the same goal.
Yes.
So I think that's really neat.
Exactly. Yeah. We're all trying to push, American karting and American drivers to that next level.
Yeah.
And I think you can even see it with some of our, some of the new cadet kids that are coming up, some of the junior and senior kids that are coming up. Just being able to say what Ryan Norberg's been able to do in the X30 class is, there's some damn respect right there.
Yeah.
Everybody loves to hate on him, for being so successful and winning all these races and, all the rumors that go around.
That's what happens when you do well.
But
Everybody hated Jimmy Johnson. Everybody hated Michael
Yeah.
Schumacher. If you win a bunch, you're going to get hated on. This is the
but
way it works.
That kid, bring any European over here, and that kid has pretty much wiped the floor with him.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just good for American karting to be able to produce a driver like that. Then I think he could go anywhere in the world and win.
Yeah.
And I think we have some shifter drivers now that could do the same thing. There's a handful of us we could go anywhere in the world and win, which is good. Which shows that we've been, pushing that envelope and developing our skill sets, and whether it's our tracks or our equipment or our teams or whatnot, we've been pushing that limit to raise ourselves to their standard. So it's not just this Italian or European dominated market. No, we can stand on our own over here. We actually might know a little bit more than you give us credit for.
For sure.
Is there ever a time kind of taking it? Obviously, karting's become the number one thing. Motocross was the number one thing before karting. Basically 15 years of motocross, and now you're going on almost a decade here of karts, hardcore, and
Obviously, car racing is next.
I was just gonna say,
yeah, the Formula One call is coming right around the corner. Right?
Yeah.
That's the number one question I get
Have you
asked.
actually had the desire?
Have you ever thought about going, car racing of any kind?
Not really. Not
No?
seriously.
Yeah.
I've had a couple opportunities here and there. And, unfortunately, most of those opportunities come with the requirement of writing a
It's like you brought your
very large
checkbook, right?
check. Yes, exactly. Which,
Weird.
I've just never really been in that position. I can't complain. I was fortunate to grow up racing, which, we all know is not a very cheap, a cheap hobby or cheap sport to participate in. But on the same token, it's not like we ever had, a ton of money to go throw it. Hey, let's go try to go to IndyCar or something like that. It's, or to even go buy the most expensive, gnarliest race bikes. It was always, do what you can, maximize your budget to put it in the most important areas and do what you can with that. And, there's a feeling of, beating people, on a subpar budget. And that's something that's actually really cool about karting, and something that actually we liked a lot about it. A lot of people, I'll come back to the car thing in a second, but a lot of people will say oh man, racing go-karts is so expensive compared to motorcycles. And I can tell you from experience, even racing motorcycles on a budget, it is easily 3 to 4 times more expensive than racing karts. namely just because the equipment on dirt on a motorcycle, it just wears out so fast.
Yeah.
And to be competitive, I mean, the amount of money you're dumping into engines and suspension and pipes and exhausts and
Seat time.
oh my God, like it is unbelievable. I mean, new tires every run, clutches.
Where
brakes.
here you got the equipment and the seat time gets you further.
Yes,
You know?
exactly, and that's
Well,
that's
your
the
seat
biggest
time's always going to
thing.
get you further, right? You're never
Right.
going to get there
Yeah.
unless you're putting the time in.
Yeah,
But
you're not having to put an extra 10 grand into your suspension on a go-kart. It's like, no, you spent 10 to 12 grand on a go-kart. That's the best stuff that's the same stuff that the guy who's winning Pro Tour is running.
Yeah.
It's not like, you just spent 10 grand on a motorcycle and it's like, well, you can't really buy Eli Tomac stuff. Like that's
Or
not
it's
really
like-
for sale.
Wait till Pro Tour's over, buy the one that he just went on.
Exactly.
And you get it for half
now
price.
it's
Exactly.
literally
Yeah.
the Pro Tour car.
And there's not really any other form of racing where you can really do that. So like karting is sold as this like spec program, this spec package where like, you can come and be competitive on the same equipment at, this is the price. And you can spend 6 figures on your engine budget, but you're only going to get,
Yeah.
a fraction of a percent out of it, which, can make a difference. But for your average guy, they can go buy a go-kart, go to the racetrack, put in the seat time, and go race with the best people in the country, and be on the same level playing field. So that's something unique about it that, unfortunately just really hasn't been expanded upon or advertised upon. But there's so much potential to bring in, the masses, and make it more appealing. We got to work on the barrier to entry and work on, making it a little bit easier to understand how these machines work and how they're not so complicated to tune once you understand what's going on, but there's a lot of little, parts and pieces to understand what's going on. So moving back to the car thing real quick, like, I've had those opportunities. I've tested some stuff here and there, and I'll just say like why I fell in love with the karts in the first place was because of that level of intensity and adrenaline that I got when I first drove one, and that I still get every time I sit in the seat. It never gets boring, and it's every time I sit in the seat and go rip laps. I mean, the shifter kart's definitely a lot more intense and adrenaline filled than a KA100, but I still have fun driving a KA100.
Mm-hmm.
I still have fun racing wheel to wheel with Jake and some of the other guys. Like, dude, it's fun. Straight up fun. And every time I've been in the car, it's just when you add that much weight, when you add that much size to the vehicle, you put the roll cage around you, you put the windshield and all that stuff.
It takes away some of that rawness.
Yeah, I've always just felt so disconnected.
Interesting.
Where like the karts feel so visceral and so intense, like you're just right there on the asphalt. Like that's
it's so
what
much
I'm
more.
after.
I don't know how, but it's just basic and mechanical.
Exactly.
You're that much more attached to it for sure. I
Yep.
agree.
Well,
It's
the driver certainly literally what you do with your body and
Yes.
everything.
Yes.
You are part of the car
Yes.
instead of how you can feel outside of it.
Yes, so much more. And I think that brings it, karting is in this spot that it's not a car. It's not a race car. It's not a Porsche or a prototype or any of these other Formula cars. And it's also not a motorcycle. It's not a jet ski. It's not a UTV. It's got something that no other sport, no other industry has in this intensity, this visceral feeling, an inch off the ground, going 80 mile an hour, holding 2.5, 3.5 Gs through corners. Like nothing else gives you that. I mean, maybe if you get to Formula 2 or Formula 1 or something, but
Well, and that's cheap too, so anyone
yeah,
can go
exactly.
do that.
Anybody can go do that, so it's no big deal.
Are there
So-
drive and drive packages on that?
Yeah.
yeah, so like for me to go do the car stuff, I've had some offers and some opportunities, but it's the money. But let's just say all that stuff aside, the reason I get behind the wheel is because it's fun, and I love the intensity and the competition. And just a few days ago, I mean, starting at the back and driving through the field and having a good race with just guys like Robbie Heck and Hunter Kelly and Vicente Salas. I mean, I just love it. I mean, it is so much fun. I wouldn't give it up.
So we can expect you starting from the back through the entire Pro Tour. As we say. Maybe not that much fun, he says.
So obviously a lot of your times at the shop, especially now, whether the race team's dialing back or not, you've always been there, and especially now, developing the chassis. I know from various sources, and as obviously as we were talking, your free time you like to play some video games.
For sure.
What have you been playing recently?
Oof, my big vice is definitely Destiny.
Okay.
I get some crap for that. But no, I mean, you just got a good group of guys, like, Luca, Vicente, and some other kids we play with.
I hear when Bedozo gets on the mic, you just
Andrew's the best. The
you
Discord,
don't understand anything.
Oh, it's the best. Andrew in the Discord, Rory. Oh man, it's pretty good. So it's just fun, being able to have that, outside of the sport without the stress, being able to just kind of turn that button off and just kind of kick back and
dude, we
be in your
get
own
it, man.
space. Yeah, exactly.
Definitely got to have that decompress.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, obviously you're a guy who has no shortage of passion for what he does and for the sport and everything like that, and you have a pretty long and illustrious career so far, and obviously not being a very old guy, you got plenty ahead of you as well. Let's say that someone listens in on this, and while it may not be retail yet, how are they going to get a hold of you if they want to get into this game with the new cart?
So until we get our whole, distribution program up and running, again, that's going to take some time. So for the meantime, we'll just be taking retail, orders to get the ball rolling. I got a list of guys already that are basically on a waiting list. But yeah, in the meantime, my cell phone, I think, has like 60 some missed texts and like 120 missed calls right now. So I got to catch up on some of that stuff. But yeah, I'm going to be doing my best. It's going to be a busy job for sure. But yeah, I'm just going to try to get this ball rolling, try to work out the kinks here over the next few weeks, the next few months. But the plan is, by the time SuperNats rolls around, SuperNats will be the big, probably official PR release and debut of the chassis and the brand and the company and all that kind of stuff, and on some of the new stuff we're working on. With 2021 being the real, kickstart.
Gotcha. So, right, you guys are going to have website, all that kind of stuff up to that point. But for the meantime, Musgrave Racing Company is the...
Exactly. They'll just handle the mediation for now.
Or kick on over and say hi during the LAKC race,
there we go.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Right on. Well, hey, man, I got to tell you, with all the guests, it's so much fun to kind of pick people's brains and whatnot. And obviously you got a lot to say about what you think about for the sport and the different angles and being involved in a bunch of different levels, from the driver to the business to now actually designing and manufacturing chassis. And it was a hell of a good time to kind of get a chance to listen to your different
Finally
sides
hear
of
the story too.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Yeah, and I learned more about Billy Musgrave in the start than I could have possibly imagined. So, hey, thanks again for coming out and playing with us. And
thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
We'll see you around at the track.
Okay.